Saintess summons skeletons by morn. Chapter 251, Photosphere. The following afternoon was a nice relaxing time between Sofia and Alith. Iwere rejoined them at one point to give his farewells as he departed for his mission. Whatever the pendant that was promised as his reward was, it was clear he was focused on giving his all to retrieve it. Sofia also asked around about old Master Combreeze's dojo, which nobody knew about until she dropped by Rahim's place again, who simply drew it as another landmark on her map, far east on the southern continent. As the scheduled time for Sofia to meet with the oracle approached, Alith decided to depart too. She confidently declared that she would bring back the bonus reward for the fastest completion, and that Sofia should be careful and could give up if she needed to. Worst case, she would be stuck in the city for a while, but surely they could get the quest revoked, or bypass the penalty. If it came to this, they would find a way. I'm pretty sure he said it's around here. Sofia was currently facing a brick wall in a narrow alley of the city's second to lowest level. A few meters behind was the busy night street of Herzl, where elves were out drinking alcohol and eating street food. This was the place the oracle had told her to go. Supposedly the wall in front of her had a hidden mechanism of some kind to open a passageway to the city's lowest level. Except she couldn't find it. Ah, whatever, this is getting annoying. Sofia summoned the graveyard of the righteous to get her through. At this point, the skill was barely ever useful in combat, but she would never think of getting rid of it. Slowly but surely, the skeletal hands arose, gently grabbed her ankles and pulled her down into the ground. Oh, it was the wrong alley after all, I was one too far to the left. It's the oracle's fault for giving such a vague explanation. Sofia walked out of the wall, directly into the passageway that led to the lower level. Dusty. They must not come here often. The absence of light was no issue. Sofia walked through the long corridor of orange bricks, trying not to pay attention to the doors on the side and the strange humming noise coming from behind them. Her destination was at the very end of this strange secret underground, a golden door, engraved with Sun's rune. This should be the dead center of the lowest level, definitely not an insignificant placement. As she approached, the door opened by itself by sinking into the ground. Sun and the oracle were already there. Sun was the first to talk. See, I told you she was coming. The circular room Sofia had just entered was covered in strange magical arrays. They looked nothing like regular ritual circles and more like messy agglomerates of parallel and perpendicular lines, but it was carrying immense amounts of mana. The whole point of it was clearly to fuel the golden platform at the center. I'm here. Please explain what I need to know. If it's not satisfying, I'm not going. Such an attitude, my dear. I am the sun, not a god of trickery. I gave you this quest because you are uniquely suited to it. How so? Sun walked closer, never dropping her signature smile. She stopped right in front of Sofia. Her voice was soft. It has to do with your blessing, she started before bending over, coming even closer to Sofia's face. The pressure coming from her was intense, much harder to deal with than even an angel's presence. Sofia was frozen solid. Sun parted Sofia's hair, cupping her ear with a hand. She brought her face even closer and whispered, "Young Miss Aphe no wrath." "Nice glove," Sun added as she pulled away, the fingers of her hand trailing over Sofia's. "I wonder where you got that." Sofia's thoughts at that instant were about as clear as a sentence written without any vowels. Sun was dangerous in more ways than one, she felt, which was oddly fitting. After another wide smile and a quick wink, Sun disappeared. "Sorry about that," the oracle apologized, "she can be a handful. She's not your daughter, you don't have to apologize." Well, yet. Let me explain more about the quest. She gave me some details before you arrived, and some things I already knew. Do you know about electricity? You mean that? Sofia started channeling a small bolt. I'm pretty familiar with it. I see, well. Did you know that this can be used to fuel its own separate kind of magic items too? What? Indeed. The issue is, mana messes with that very strongly, using it here is a futile endeavor. Sun really is curiosity incarnate. She has lived for longer than you can imagine, constantly looking further and further away, pushing the boundaries of what is possible and what is known. Thus, she had this temple built near her celestial form, in a place completely devoid of mana, in hopes to study this alternative energy source, one that, unlike mana, she can produce herself. Wait, gods cannot produce mana? No. Gods can only receive ours. Through the collective feelings of us sapient beings, the mana leaked through our emotions, their essence forms and replenishes, this is the source of their power. I'm holding on to a decent chunk of scripture's power, then. If we were to disappear, what would happen? They disappear too. Then by finding another energy source, isn't Sun trying to find a way to get rid of us? No, I told you, she wants to explore more, discover more. She cannot afford to lose any part of that. Yet she would give me 5 of her essences? This the oracle walked around the golden platform. I believe she sees it as an investment. If you can reclaim the temple, not only would she be able to proceed with her experiments, she can get you indebted to her. Right now you aren't worth much, but should you keep growing, the better your image of her, the more power she will gain back from you, to no disservice to you either. The ones suffering from this would only be the other gods. Does this mean there is a competition among gods to snatch the worship of high-level people? And they invest early, the lords have essences too. I wonder how that plays into this. Should you really be telling me all this, then? Sir Oracle. You heard her. She has no time for trickery. And from my observations, I believe the best way to rope you in is to be as honest as possible about the benefits and inconvenience of the situation. Not wrong. The oracle continues, crossing his arms, you strike me as the kind of individual who cares about the results more than the process, Sofia. Am I wrong? You're not. I suppose you had plenty of time to learn how to analyze people's personality. How old are you anyway? Very old, compared to you, but what does that matter? No matter how old or how strong, there are things I cannot do, and today you are tasked with one of them. Shall I explain your mission in more detail? No doubt that I'm going to take it. I really should have kept poker face. Explain away. First of all, Sun cannot go to the orbital temple herself. A few thousand years ago, she launched this temple away from our planet for the reasons I explained earlier. This city was built on the relay meant to communicate with it. 3 days after the temple reached its stable orbit around the Sun, she lost all contact. More elves were sent but none came back. It took her a while to create tools to investigate what happened. Simple magic was for some reason insufficient. Before I was appointed, she had already given up on recovering it, she has never stated why. And now it seems, she believes you may be able to fix it. Because of the deep? The quest she issued clearly mentions monsters. The Sun Temple is held by creatures of the deep? Is that a possibility? Unless she meant something else. The blessing also protects against status effects, but that's nothing special. No, if only I can do it, then. Blessing of the Deep, 2/4, the Saintesser was granted a name. They may see the inhabitants of the deep. The Saintesser and their summons are immune to the mind control, hypnosis, confusion, insanity, domination, soul parasite and instant death status effects. Next function unlocks at 3/4. They may see the inhabitants of the deep. It has to be about this. Now I'm curious 2.n/o/vel/b//in.c//om. How do I know that teleporting there is safe? And won't my own mana regeneration mess with the things out there if it was built expressly to be far from mana? I will go with you to confirm that, if it is unsafe, I have ways to get us out, although we might be stranded in space for a few months. If it is safe, I will leave, because my mana would interfere with the orbital support system of the temple. Although I can control it somewhat, Sun's estimations are that my simple presence would sink the temple into the Sun in around 20 minutes. That is what she told me a few moments before you entered. As for your mana, it should be fine for a while. I believe this is where the 3-month deadline comes from. You mean you produce as much mana in 20 minutes as I do in 3 months? That's a level 499 for you. Chapter 252, Higher Beings. Sofia observed the teleportation platform, wondering if it was even safe to use such an old technology. When do we go? Whenever you want. A few things though. First of all, you will need to put these glasses on if you do not want to end up blind, the oracle answered, handing Sofia a pair of almost pitch-black glasses which blocked light from all directions. Sofia tried the glasses and she couldn't see anything anymore. This is as good as being blind. You're going on the Sun, don't even worry about it. The other thing is, the teleportation process should take about an hour. An hour? The Sun is just that far from us. So, do we go now? Let me think about it, Mr. Sky. You wouldn't happen to have a free week or two to help me practice an angelic spell? It would make the quest easier. Do you not want to help your god reclaim her temple? Sofia tried with a smile and a wink, just like Sun had done to her. What have I done? Sure, whatever. Follow me to Morn's training room. It seemed the Sun's oracle had a lot of free time on his hands, unlike the other high-level people Sofia had met until now. The muscular elf was clearly used to teaching, he even had his own coach chair in the Saintess training room. He was a bit surprised that Sofia was able to use the angel's magic, and no matter how he tried, he never managed to replicate it, but his advice to Sofia was invaluable. She had made basically no progress on the new version of the bolt until now, and by the end of the first week, Sofia was already able to use a slightly unstable but functional copy of it. After that, he decided to see how she fought in a mock battle against him. His reaction was word for word, "How in the high heavens did you survive until now?" After which he proceeded to give Sofia a second, much more painful week of training focusing on close combat and dodging. After the second week, Sofia was the one wishing for it to end. Sprint reached level 42. Sprint reached level 43. Sprint reached level 44. Radiance reached level 52. Radiance reached level 57. Evasion reached level 76. Evasion reached level 98. Good work. This should be enough for now. Go take a good nap and a shower, I will be waiting for you in the transmission room. Finally over. This guy never stops. This is what a real demon looks like. No wonder Morn is such a freak, I'm shocked that Alith could keep up with her at all. Sofia trudged out of the training room, her and on the brink of passing out. No amount of healing could cure the fatigue she felt after the hellish training. Someone else appeared in the training room after Sofia left. She holds rather well, don't you think, little Sky? For a magic class, she sure does. She's been copying system tools even. But will that be enough for where we're sending her? We can only wait and see, perhaps she won't have to fight at all. The circumstances of the Lords and their attack on me are still vague even after all this time. There wasn't any follow-up, was there? Not after I gave up on the orbital station. It was a wise choice. What happened to Curse? Aren't you asking for a beating by sending her there after all? If my assumptions are correct, we should be fine. There will never not be danger when interacting with the Lords, but this might be the best way to go about it. Since they have, for once, shown interest in something. Hopefully 5 essences are enough of a peace offering. Worst case, I give up on the station for good. This is the most surprising part to me. It's astonishing to see them so active all at once too. Even the dormant one seems to be awakening. That is her work as well. What, really? To be fully prepared, Sofia took the time to apply 3 false immortality runes, as well as regenerating her mana by summoning and dispelling some book skeletons, absorbing their mana through heat death. Then, after the book recovered all its fog, she headed for the transmission room again. Oracle Sky was already there when she entered the room, sitting cross-legged on the teleportation platform slowly feeding it mana. Finally there. Come sit with me, as I said, this will take about an hour. Don't forget to put on the glasses at the end. Alright. I forgot to say it, but thank you for the training, I learned a lot. It's the duty of us older folks to train the new generation. Would you train anyone who asks? Perhaps. Few have the determination to do so, let alone to see through to the end of the training. I could see that. Is it not weird to be as strong as you are? I am still nowhere near that, but I barely feel human anymore. And the demon transformations aren't helping. Power is but a tool. It does not change who you are, only what you can do. Simply being around people for long enough will alleviate this feeling of yours, try to avoid prolonged isolation. But the hard part is outliving those very same people. I never got used to it. I don't think I would want to get used to that. But I see, thanks for the advice by the way, if the teleportation takes an hour, and you would sink the orbital temple by staying there for 20 minutes, how will you leave? How much do you know about teleportation? I know the basics, soul tunnels, space stretching. Good, then, what we are doing right now is sending your soul out there, it's pretty far already. Really? I don't really feel a difference. Because the monolink is uninterrupted. We will be using this to transport both of our bodies there, but I will make sure my soul stays here. After confirmation that the teleporter room is safe and that you can proceed, I will use my own soul and the path we just carved as the anchor for the return teleportation. Which will be much faster. If the teleportation platform on the other end is dysfunctional, this will not work, in which case I will bring you back with me on a space journey. What about the quest? If it comes to this, I am certain that the quest would become invalid and be cancelled by your scribe. After almost an hour of idle conversation, which included asking about the dragon handprint that Sky knew nothing about, Sofia felt space stretch around her. Before she knew it, she was sitting in a similar but larger room, with all kinds of tubes, buttons, levers and black slates around. It seems everything worked perfectly. The situation also looks rather calm. This is your last chance to turn back, Sofia. You will not be able to reactivate the teleportation platform without clearing the station and reactivating the main engine. You do not have enough mana to teleport by yourself without it. Activating the engine? How do I do that? It should be pretty obvious when you see it, is what Sun said. Will that be all? I must leave quickly, Sky said, his voice uneasy. I will be all right, see you in a bit, prepare my reward in advance. Sky threw his head back in laughter. Sure thing, Saintess, sure thing. Good luck. Gone. Just like that. All right, let's see what present the lords have left in this space temple. I said nothing, but it's interesting that they would attack something unprompted like this. Sun must have been doing something that she shouldn't have here. Was she really just trying to harvest her own energy? Sofia tried identifying the black slates on the walls only to be welcomed by an error message. Error. Couldn't establish connection, user will enter temporary scribe-only mode. To avoid operating slowdown, please keep at least 10,000 mana available at all times. Anomalies may arise. You will be reconnected when possible, until then many subsystems will be unavailable. Oh, yeah, right. Can't establish connection. We're just too far then. Another identify cast returned different results. Screen, used to display things, currently out of power. Oh, so it's like the wall displays in the ranking tower, got it. Looking around the closed room, Sofia managed to find a single working screen near the door. A few lines were displayed in weak red letters, written in Elvish. Sofia smiled. Finally, studying that introduction to written Elvish I found in Zangdar's castle is paying off. Station Power Supply Control Panel. Power Supply Status. Main Power Supply Offline. Secondary Power Supply Offline. Emergency Power Supply onlinn/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. Current Module Status. Trajectory Correctors Low Power. Temperature Regulation Low Power. Doors Offline. Life Support Offline. Defense System Offline. Transmission Platform Offline. Flare Protection Offline. Below the lines, there was a drawing of only a few lines, labeled Trajectory. It showed the temple represented by Sun's rune, with a line showing its orbit around the Sun. Along the orbit line a small note said 502 minutes per rotation. I don't know what life support is for exactly, but it feels like having this one be off isn't such a good thing. The doors won't open, but that isn't too much of an issue. I can redirect the power with the side buttons, I think. Sofia pushed the button lined up with trajectory correctors and the plus button for the life support module. The orbit line around the Sun updated, showing that after about half a rotation, the station would end up inside the Sun. Oh, that's not good at all. She quickly reversed her changes, fixing the trajectory. So if I do that, I change my deadline from 3 months to 4 hours. Deciding that the best plan of action for now was probably not to change any parameters at all, as the place was at least stable, she was about to quickly graveyard through the door when she felt a tremor. Somehow, her body froze. This was not the instinctual reaction that had sometimes paralyzed her in the presence of higher beings like the Archangel, it was a different sensation she had only really felt twice in her life. Afinareth. Chapter 253, Family Pictures. I'm free to move again. Did he leave? Didn't even see him. Oh right, I better put the black glasses back on. Really can't see much with these on. It's a bit harder to move here. I feel heavy. Sofia used the graveyard skeletons to phase through the door. Now she could use it with or without the graves popping up without much effort, and the channeling was fast enough that she could use it to almost seamlessly activate it and walk through walls anytime. The teleportation room was at the very end of a corridor with 3 doors on each side. Sofia tried to analyze the contents of the closed rooms with her mana senses as she passed by, to no avail as there was no mana around. She figured this floor was probably some kind of living quarters of some sort. I'll come back to this later. Since it wasn't moving, Sofia kept going. The skeletons grabbed her through the door at the other end of the corridor. This one's thicker. The other side was a small empty circular room with only some vents on the side and another thick door. What's the point of this room even? Going through yet another door, Sofia finally understood why the glasses the oracle had given her were so dark. This door had led outside. After climbing a short ladder up, there was no more roof or anything. This looked to be the highest floor of the elven temple, in space. The glasses were basically black, yet Sofia still had a hard time seeing anything through the light and glare. I don't know why I'm surprised. The sun is really bright. The temperature on the outside is really bad too. I'm sweating already. I can survive this, but it's quite bad. Also no air. Plenty of light though, so I'm not going to have any issue. Actually, can't I survive off of just my mana now? I might not even need light to breathe anymore. Of course no ambient mana around here, but I knew that already. Sofia deactivated her armor and wings. The wings were useless here and the armor just made the heat worse. If something gets a surprise attack on me, I have the runes. Ugh. I feel a bit bloated. Strange. She looked around. This top floor of the orbital temple was like an observation deck, mostly flat, with guardrails along the side, stairs going down, and weird metallic poles sticking out of the ground. To her left, Sofia spotted Afinareth. He was leaning on the guardrail, staring directly at the sun, motionless, his brown suit and small flat hat still the same as ever. She walked up to him, standing on his left. She looked at the sun like he did. The station was speeding forward, like gliding along the surface of the massive ball of fire. This is incredible. Sofia tried to talk but she couldn't. In fact, she just now realized that everything was silent too. She couldn't hear anything except her own heartbeat. The great ball of fire and explosions that was the sun should be really loud, she had thought, but she just didn't hear anything. A system window appeared out of nowhere, characters filling it one by one. Observe. Reading the message, she looked at Afinareth. He was looking up, so Sofia also looked up. Oh shit! Is that the planet? It's not as big as the sun usually is in the sky. I guess the sun is just much bigger. Even from afar, the planet was quite colorful, mostly covered in the white of clouds and the blue of oceans. It looks a bit like a big catalyst I could put on my staff. Hey, I can see the moons too. Wait, the moons? 2 of them? At first Sofia wondered if she was looking at the wrong planet, but she couldn't see any other ones, although it could have been hidden by the giant ball of fire blocking half her vision. Looking at the moons again, it seemed a smaller moon was hiding behind the larger one, moving in tandem around the planet. If it stays like that all the time, we would never see the small moon. Crazy. How many more secrets is the planet hiding like that? I definitely want to go explore the moon and the hidden moon now. I'm really glad that VPPV is helping my eyesight, or I would barely be able to see anything. It says it helps in low light, but it really made my eyes better overall. Once again, Sofia tried to speak in vain, and instead resorted to thinking loudly, knowing that there was a good chance Afinareth could read her mind anyway. Thank you for saving me last time. And I also heard that it was you who brought Alith here from her world. Thank you for that as well. And for the name. I'm really grateful. Can we see Alith's planet from here? Afinareth's head slowly moved. He no longer looked at the sun or the planet but at Sofia. His blank expression and black eyes didn't convey much, but the subtle shaking of his head was the answer. He then turned again to look at the sun. No, is it because it's too far away? How far could it be? Are all the stars small shining suns in the distance? How big is all that? Looking at it from here it feels ridiculous. Life, death, the system, gods, everything. Well, I'm still a part of it all anyway. And I have a mission to work on. If I understand correctly, it's the deep that attacked this place. I suppose this is why you're here. Why did you attack this in the first place? Regulator. So it was Orman Cleith's doing. If the name is anything to go by, it intervened to enforce regulations of some sort? Wouldn't I be a bother if I interfere now, then? Could I even do anything about it anyway? What should I do? Quest. A tremor went through the station. The source of the shock seemed to come from behind. Sofia turned around, but she couldn't see anything out of place. When she looked back, Afinareth had disappeared. He had left behind something on the large guardrails, a Midanisit tablet. He brought it back? Sofia thought as she grabbed the familiar piece of blue crystal. It seemed to be the same one he had previously taken from her, but the carving depicting a cold-looking Afinareth with elf ears was no longer. In its stead was a stylized carving of Sofia and himself, in front of the sun, looking at the planet. "I'll keep this precious gift. Thanks again." This was significantly less scary than the previous times. "Alright. To the quest then, I have as clear a permission as I can get. I need to find the monsters of Ormoncleith and get rid of them, I guess, if the quest objective is anything to go by. Seems like a tall order. Not the finding part, but what would Ormoncleith even do to a place like this?" Sofia looked around the whole top floor. She could make out that the main body of the station was a big upside-down pyramid, like an upside-down Herzl. There were 3 smaller upside-down pyramids linked to it by very weak-looking bridge corridors on 3 of its 4 sides. It was a wonder that they all held, Sofia thought, until she realized there was a 4th such bridge, broken in the middle. Never mind then. Let's hope there wasn't anything important in that part because it's gone for good. This doesn't make me very impatient to explore the side pyramids. If one of these breaks off while I'm on it, I'm gone for good. It was a good call to train the piercing bolts before coming because the explosive bolts are a big no-go here. Before anything else, Sofia returned to the interior of that level. She checked every room one by once, phasing through the doors. She had been wrong in her first assumptions that it was a living space of some kind. Each room was full of nothing but cables and mostly dysfunctional machinery. It seemed the energy distribution panel was in the teleportation room because all the modules it deserved were right next to it. All safe. With that taken care of, she returned to the roof and took the stairs down to the level below. Sofia looked left and right, not sensing any danger so far. She walked along the guardrails. This level was built like a giant balcony, going all the way around a central block of more indoor stuff with exactly 1 door leading into it from each side of the station. Only by doing an almost full loop around the level did she find the stairs going down to the lower level. Since it was an inverse pyramid, each level was slightly smaller than the one above. Every level looked like it followed the same pattern of an external walkway going around a square walled-off section. Sofia was debating whether to keep going down and explore the entirety of the walkway or to go back up to the second highest level and explore its interior. n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. As she was contemplating her options, sitting on the first step of the stairs, something on the other end of the walkway slowly showed itself as it walked the turn. It looked like an elf, but its skin was grey. It looked dead, but it slowly shambled forward, gradually revealing itself. An elf zombie? There's something wrong with its head. There was something inside of the dead elf, behind its cracked face, spilling out of its burst cranium. Something large and iridescent, contracting and dilating, breathing. This isn't a zombie at all. It made Sofia's hair stand on end. Shuddering, she ran back up the stairs. Chapter 254, Space and Opera. Sofia ran all the way back up to the roof of the station, where she knew for sure that nothing could ambush her from behind. It felt safer even if it meant there was a possibility she might get cornered there. Of course she could always use the graveyard to escape, but if she was left with enough time to do that, the thing probably wasn't dangerous enough to warrant her escape in the first place. At least for now it did not seem like that creature had detected her. How do I deal with this thing? In this place with no sound, the unlife rune hid most of her presence. She was still visible of course, but the thing might have not been able to see, or it would have undoubtedly noticed her. Or maybe it did, but it still did not chase me. Let's test the waters a bit. The Book of Skeletons made its entrance. Sofia decided to send the one dog on a hunt, the same one which had been an elven kid's temporary guardian in the trial. For only 20 mana, it was cheap and efficient. One couldn't underestimate the damage a level 226 hound could do. The skeleton dog departed, followed by Perith. Perith wouldn't fight, he was just there to stand safely at a distance and relay the image to Sofia. I should have done that from the beginning. I really need to start acting like a proper necromancer. I've been taking too much risk until now. Perith and the dog found the creature on the floor right under Sofia. It had gone up the stairs. Somehow I hoped it wouldn't. What is this even? Some kind of parasitic mushroom? It looks a bit like one with the honeycomb structure that opens up when it breathes. The iridescent thing inside of the elf kept dilating and contracting. When it dilated, it filled everything, spilling out of the mouth, ears and eyes as well as the broken back of the head, before contracting again. When it was contracting, the elf looked almost normal. Should a walking corpse be considered ordinary? Sorry dog, you have to go. Attack. The skeletal hound charged forward, swiftly closing the distance. It lunged at the creature. The body of the corrupted elf reacted with an unnatural motion, swatting away the attacking dog, sending it crashing into the walls of the station. The wall held, which was a testament to the durability of the station rather than the power of the creature, because Sofia had felt the tremor it had sent through the station from where she was. Sofia had expected the dog to die on the spot, but it was unharmed. Ahaha, yeah, right. I don't know why I didn't do the math on that, but we're completely in a place with sunlight. Bookie's blessing is pulling its weight. Sofia's moment of relief was short-lived. The elf, in a single strong movement, grabbed the dog. It moved like it had too much strength and no finesse in the control of its body, resulting in exaggerated actions. It made the scene even more unsettling. The elf brought the dog before him. The skeleton fought back, clawing and gnawing at the monster, but no visible damage was inflicted at all. The iridescent parasite inside the elf inflated like never before. It grew and grew until it took all the space in the corridor. What the fuck is happening? Sofia ordered the dog to attack the thing rather than the elf, but the result was the same, and it couldn't free itself from the elf's iron grip. As the iridescent parasite grew, its empty honeycombs filled up. All at once, they released their contents. A swarm of hundreds of bulbous spider-like iridescent blobs fell to the ground and started climbing back up the elf's legs, up to his arm, crawling on it and onto the dog. I'm losing the connection. Dispel. The dog disappeared in a cloud of mana mist before she completely lost her link to it. That was the good news. On the other hand, the hundreds of parasites were now skittering in the direction of Perith after having lost their prey of choice. This was terrifying enough, but to add insult to injury, they grew tendril-shaped wings and started flying. Shit! Jump off! Without any hesitation, Perith leapt over the guardrails and jumped out of the station. As he fell toward the sun, the flying bulbous things followed him. Sofia's eyes were glued to Perith's health bar. As he flew closer to the sun, there was no doubt the rising temperature would start destroying him, but it still couldn't hurt him if it counted for less than 10% of his health at once. The instant his life started falling, he teleported back to Sofia. She ran to the side of the floor, looking down to see if the flying things came back up, but she couldn't spot them anywhere above the sea of plasma. Hopefully they're dumb enough to keep going down into the sun. You have probably defeated swarm of. Probably? You don't have to say anything if you don't know, it's fine. But damn, your enforcer things are fucking terrifying, Orman Cleith. And if I read my blessing correctly, I'm pretty much the only person capable of seeing them. Yeah, I think I understand why no one ever comes back from the deep now. Also, these things could fly with no air and no mana, because of course they would be able to do that. I need to keep an eye on that monster. I can let myself get cornered. Sofia summoned her best crow out of the book. It was likely it wouldn't be able to fly, but she wanted to be sure of it. As expected, poor Crowy couldn't leave the ground, so Sofia grabbed it and sat it on her head. Just be a danger alarm like you were in the spirit forest, all right? Next she summoned a rat, but the smooth surface of the station's walls prevented it from being able to climb down. It fell into the sun as it tried to reach the lower floor by the side wall. Sofia dispelled before it could really get there. For some reason she felt like the blessing wouldn't be enough to actually protect the summons from the sun itself. She even felt that if they did fall in there, they might be gone for good. Perhaps it was just her imagination going a bit wild, but she still didn't want to try. I could scout with the graveyard, but I don't want to send too much mana through the walls, considering why the time limit is what it is. What else do I have? The giant ice spiders. The waste of 50,000 mana was a bit of a sting, but the skeleton spiders could thread webs and walk on any walls without issues, so they would be perfect for the unusual environment of the orbital station. Their ice magic would be useless considering how hot the area was, but it didn't make them any less useful. Even with the 5 giant spiders appearing around Sofia, the roof was still very spacious. She sent a spider down. Hanging on its thread, it confirmed the position of the shambling elf. It was slowly walking forward. At this rate, it would be on the roof where Sofia was in a few minutes. At least there were no signs of the swarm anywhere it looked. All right, not too bad, hang in there, keep track of its progress, try not to let it see you. She kept one of the spiders with her and sent the other 3 to the other sides. Their job was to stretch a web from the roof to the 3 small pyramids. The spiders spread out and came back, leaving 2 threads of magically reinforced spider silk between each platform. Now if I take a bit of silk, tie myself to one thread for safety and walk on the other. Sofia used her silken tightrope to walk to a side pyramid. She wasn't really skillful enough to perform such a feat, though she might have been able to if she really tried, but she just relied on Way of the Fool's anti-fall function to walk on there as if it was regular stable ground. Just like that, she landed on the roof of the side pyramid without going through the dangerous corridors further below. She turned around at that point to see the elf finally stepping out of the stairs onto the main roof. Too late, honeycomb monster. That's a good 500 meters separating us now. I doubt it would be able to follow me on the thread considering how imprecise its movements are, but I need to be careful of the flying swarm. Though maybe it can't use it again so soon? That would be helpful if it worked like that. In any case, I should be careful not to give my position away. n/o/vel/b//in.c//om. Sofia crouched to hide behind the guardrail. She thought it was weird how this roof had one even when apparently no door or stairs led up to it, but who was she to criticize elven architecture? The spiders were spread out, hanging on the walls of the main and side stations. I should take advantage of this thing being in an open area and not the sidewalks. She cast Skull Choir with 30 human skulls in the orbital array formation. They appeared around her, but before she could even send them to attack the elf, she frowned. They won't actually work, will they? She ordered one of them to attack, aiming at nothing. The skull opened its mouth, and nothing happened. No air, of course air attacks wouldn't work. Just my luck, so much for trying to blow it off of the rooftop and into the sun. And in this empty space, they can't even sing either, completely useless. Trying in vain to sigh, because there was no air left in her lungs, Sofia dismissed the Skull Choir. I need to wait for the 3-minute cooldown to try the worm skulls now. And if they don't work, I'll just bolt the damn thing. Sofia was making her plans to try to take out the monster when the spiders became agitated. All of them? What's going on? Sofia's head peeked over the guardrail. To her great dismay, she saw that the parasite inside the elf had grown large tendril-like wings, just like a scaled-up version of the ones its swarm had grown before. She very quickly crouched back down. The lack of air stifled a bout of nervous laughter. Ah, yes. Just what I needed. Chapter 255, Crowded Walls. An important detail about the corrupted elf growing wings was that he had been clearly looking in the direction of Sofia. With little options left, she did two things. The first was to start channeling the graveyard, the second was to order the skeleton spiders to jump straight into the sun if the elf found them. She debated leaving Perith alone on the roof to confront the thing and see if he could at least injure it, but ultimately decided against it. Losing Perith now would be more than a bit annoying. She finally phased through the roof of the small inverted pyramid section she had been on before the monster could reach her. The cold grasp of the graveyard skeletons had never felt so warm. Since Sofia had been on the border of the roof, she was currently sinking through the external wall. Can I spot those things while I'm in the spirit plane? Coming out of the wall at a random place could be dangerous. I can feel that this side section has 3 floors. At least there's nothing alive in there, nothing that has mana or a soul at least. The graveyard skeletons themselves could change freely from one plane to another, they were in a constant in-between, so as 2 of them kept pulling Sofia down, she ordered another to check if there were any elves in the first room and if so, to come back into the wall immediately. The skeleton barely poked the front of its face out of the wall before it reeled back. Pull me down faster. I saw when I was walking on the spider rope that the door to the lowest level was just open. Hopefully there's a closed room on the middle floor. Though she could vaguely map out the place due to most physical things being largely transparent in the spiritual plane, it also made the exact details hard to grasp. People's bodies and most small objects especially didn't really show up except for their soul and mana. But for thick structures like walls, trees, and such, they existed as these white layers of cloudy fog in a sea of white light everywhere. Long story short, she had to trust the graveyard skeletons to find a safe landing point free of elven horror. And though it pained her to admit it, the graveyard skeletons were her dumbest skeletons by a long shot. They just weren't very bright when it came to anything that wasn't pull people into ground. Still, the skeletons apparently found it safe to bring her out in the central room of the second floor. Just in case, she stuck her hand with the storage ring out of the wall, and as soon as it started to turn corporeal, she dumped Perith out of there and looked through his eyes. No elves. Thank fuck. Sofia's feet got caught in a bunch of metal doodads when she stepped out of the wall, Way of the Fool, narrowly saving her from falling face first on the brick floor as she stumbled forward into a gravity-defying position. Just then, she lost connection to the 2 skeleton spiders which had been in the same place as her, which she decided to label the north building. So that thing really followed me as well as found and attacked the spider. I didn't even realize it had jumped. Until then, Sofia had still wanted to hold on to the foolish hope that perhaps these weren't wings but some kind of feelers that just happened to look like the small thing's wings, but no, these were wings as well. She wanted to curse more but she forced herself to calm down, panic wouldn't help her. At least the thing had gone after the spider and not her, so that was something. Now she had to hope that her trip to the spirit plane had been enough for it to lose her tracks. Finally, she took some time to observe the room she was in. There was a lot of strange machinery everywhere. It was very reminiscent of the room in which she and Alith had fought the previous owner of Zangdar. These won't start spewing out steam, right? Sofia's next reflex was to walk up to the heavy metal door and try to open it. She was relieved to find that it was completely stuck like the other doors she had seen until now. Nothing entered here in forever, I bet. So as long as I don't do anything, I should probably be safe here maybe. I don't have anything better at least. Reflexively, Sofia tried identifying things in the room, but except for stuff like levers and buttons. The scribe seemed just as lost as herself when it came to knowing what these things were for. It seemed to be a whole thing all linking to a big mechanical thing in the middle of the room. The more Sofia looked, the less she understood, until she found a locked glass case on a wall in between countless tubes and gears. Behind the glass, on which the elvish words for "Do not open without permission" were engraved, she could see a thick book titled, Flare Protection Module Models. That at least answers what this room is for. Kind of. There was a flare protection module listed as offline on the main power panel. I don't know what a flare is in this context. I doubt it has anything to do with the flare arrows of the Paladin Scouts, but whatever it was, the protection clearly wasn't good against a Deep Lord's envoys. There was a defense system module too. I guess this was the one actually meant to protect against intruders. Maybe reactivating it could be helpful, if I'm not part of what it tries to defend the place from. Who knows how much I'm mistranslating anyway, half these words I have to guess. Reactivating the station's modules could be a good first step to try to get rid of these things. Honestly, it's interesting that this facility is in such good shape considering what roams inside. The south building is missing but I haven't seen much damage besides that. I guess the root question is why would Ormoncleith prevent its operation yet not just sink the whole thing? Sofia felt a tug at her consciousness. The remaining skeletal spiders weren't disconnected, but they were clearly trying to send some kind of message. They were showing the same kind of agitation they had when the monster had grown wings. What is it now? Perith appeared next to Sofia. The room could host his large body without trouble as elves were usually quite tall. He pointed at something on the side of the room before disappearing into her ring again. Some kind of barred hole. What's that? Air vents. It's not like the elves can fit. The revelation of what was to come made her skin crawl. She hurriedly channeled the graveyard of the righteous. The swarm. Without any kind of scouting, she sank straight through the floor to the lower level, her head phasing through the ground just in time to catch a glimpse of the sprawling mass of bulbous creatures gushing out of the vent. Frantically looking around, she cursed in her heart. This room had the exact same kind of air vents. She rushed to the closed door and phased through. Now in a corridor, she freaked out at the sight of even more air vents. Now that she knew about them, she could see them everywhere. She ran randomly, phasing into every room she could find to see if any was safe. She couldn't hear the swarm crawling in the walls but more than once she spotted their presence from the corner of her eyes as she phased through the walls. She had never been so thankful for a place to be so large and to have such a complicated layout. Had the building been smaller, she would have been quickly surrounded. In a hurry, she summoned her own swarm out of the book, the 100 rats. Spread out, map the whole place, use the vents, dispel yourself if the things so much as come close to touching you. The rats quickly ran off, using the vents to their advantage. They were quick to spread around but also quick to disappear. Sofia hid inside the walls. This was soon to be the only safe place left on this floor. The rats quickly found out that the swarm already occupied most of the building. The only place still relatively free was the third floor. They knew where I was from the start then, didn't bother searching up there. That's bad news. It was then that the few remaining rats made a discovery. A single room for which they couldn't find a way in. A room without air vents. Sofia was elated by the discovery until she understood where this was. It was the room on the third floor that Sofia had passed by on her way down. The one she had skipped because the graveyard skeletons had detected the presence of an elf.n/o/vel/b/in.c/om. Chapter 256, The Random Junk You Collect Along the Way. If I want to keep my unlife runes up, I can't keep wasting mana hiding in the walls. Sofia had her ghostly skeletons carry her through the thick walls up to the third floor, taking special care to avoid the air vents. The skeletons had previously backed up from that room, letting Sofia know that there was an elf in there, but the graveyard skeletons were quite dumb, so maybe they had been mistaken. Slowly nearing the closed room, Sofia focused without producing any results. To her senses, that room was still empty. Carefully, she poked a finger out of the wall to let Perith out. She felt a wave of relief when she discovered there was no iridescent creature lying in ambush inside. So there was actually an elf. Credit where credit is due, I was the one giving a bad order this time. In the spacious room, which seemed to be an office of some kind with much machinery of undecipherable use everywhere, a long dead elf sat in an armchair. Like a dried zombie. Looks like he tore down some of the machines to reinforce the door and plug the vents. This steel must be pretty darn strong if it can stop the level 200 rats. Sofia's first order of business was to make sure these barricades would hold. Basically, she just stacked more heavy things in front of the door and the vents. It wouldn't stop the elven parasite thing, but it should be enough to fend off the swarm, which seemed to lack any attacking power whatsoever besides probably spreading the parasite on contact. I never tried attacking them, did I? Well, I don't really know how. The whip is the best option maybe, assuming I can even hurt them. Turning her attention toward the dead elf, Sofia quickly understood what had transpired in this place. The state of the room and the corpse told her all she needed to know. This elf must have witnessed what had happened to the other elves. He had first barricaded himself, and when he ran out of supplies, had decided to leave this world on his own accord rather than risk becoming one of the monsters. And his body has survived long enough to tell the tale. It should have become nothing but a pile of dust by now. I suppose without air it works differently, no maggots or carrion eaters either. The fact that anything still works here after who knows how many thousands of years of neglect speaks volume about both this strange environment and the elven technology. I can clearly see now that the mage in Zangdar was studying the same kind of thing. I wonder if his own version would be considered an upgrade or the contrary. I shouldn't let myself get distracted. I have 3 months, how do I kill the corrupted elves? First I need to know how many there are. Sofia focused on her link with the few remaining rats. She hoped they could flee and survive long enough to be useful still. She quickly understood that no matter where they went, they couldn't hide from the swarm, which seemed to track them wherever they fled to. Still, a few of them managed to survive by leaving the building altogether and finding refuge in dark corners of the main building. The ones left in the same building as her all got tracked down by the swarm and dispelled themselves before they could be taken. She could only lay low for a while and hope that her rune of unlife masking the heat and mana she produced would be enough to escape the scrutiny of the swarm. Considering it had found her once before, she was not hopeful. Thus, she hid in her sealed room with a long dead elf for sole company. She wanted to try to feed it to her book, it still had a skeleton, after all, but it would have to wait, she couldn't risk using any external mana right now. Laying low had paid off, nothing came to bother for the next hour, after which she put all the things she had thought of during that time to execution. In Sofia's hand was a bone-made wireframe 3-dimensional map of the entire northern inverted pyramid she was stuck in. After the spiders on the outside had to jump off, confirming that the elven-hosted monstrosity had left her for now, she sent one of her measly 3 surviving rats to check for the presence of the swarm. It was gone. Following that, she had them carefully lay out a plan of the place for her by ordering them to walk along every corner of every room, staying close to the wall when possible. It was then a simple task of precisely making a small-scale bone sculpture out of their movements. She could easily track tens of birds on a flat map back in the Trials labyrinths, but in 3 dimensions, following 3 speedy rats was already pushing it. She had to order them to slow down multiple times just to be able to keep up. Eventually though, the result was worth the headache. Despite only understanding the layout of rooms and vents without any indication of what room had what purpose, she wouldn't have to navigate this part of the orbital temple blindly anymore. She also knew for certain that there were no other hostiles in there for now, which was a great relief. Alright, next up is some reading. Fishing around inside of her ring, among all of her chaotic but organized mess of possessions, she finally the one book from ZHNGL's collection that she hadn't read yet. It was a thick softcover book titled Field Usage of Power Cores in Deployment of Mana Isolation Fields and High-Frequency Lattice Shields. She needed a way to use a lot of mana without risking drawing Ormancleath Spawn's attention, so Zangdar's Mana Isolation Field was potentially exactly what she needed. She still had the power cores and the strange brass contraption that came with it, having never used them after getting them from the very same ring she still stored them in. Of course, she had contemplated learning to use it more than once, but the book was a pain to sit through. She didn't understand a quarter of the words on each page. Either way, now she had the opportunity to use the damn thing, she would try again. Perhaps her newfound experience in deciphering the draconic language would help her guess the meaning of the unknown words. It hadn't been an hour before she wanted to give up. Her progress was terribly slow, and she was on a tight time limit. She couldn't afford spending 2 of her 3 months reading a book. As she decided to close the book, she felt a small shock in her brain, and her health tracker opened. "Sir Scribe?" Sofia focused on the health bar. In front of it, another small system notification flashed for a fraction of a second. It sent a wave of pain through Sofia's skull that made her reel back, gritting her teeth. Pill. As far as the scribe's communication attempts went, this was the tamest pain backlash from it to date. It was pretty clear to Sofia now that the scribe knew very well how to communicate, but for some reason wasn't allowed to. Even when in scribe-only mode, the system must have had some safeguards in place to prevent scribes from acting out of place. Pill? Another riddle like last time? Or it could be just pill, but an L got erased to save a character. Pills these? Right, I have 3 of them. Never ate them because Sen said I should level up a few times to be safe before getting more stats. Processing pill, consume to gain 5000 maximum processing. Nov, L, B / JNN. Item level, 200. Grade, flawless. Now is a good time I suppose? Is processing meant to help me with the book? I hope this is what you meant because I don't really see it if pill is meant to be something else. Oh, right, I still have this thing too. Scroll of assisted inspiration, infuse it with mana after writing your current issue on it, the system will provide you inspiration to resolve the problem. One-time use. Item level, 100. Grade, flawless. The situation isn't desperate enough to use that now, but that's an option if it even works. It could very well not, considering the system apparently doesn't reach here. Kind of strange that it could reach into the margin to Zangdar but not to the sun, which shouldn't be that far in comparison. I mean, it's in the same plane at least. Sofia really wanted to make the mana compartment field work. If she was right and the monster tracked her from her mana emission, it would allow her to create a safe space where she could relax, regenerate her mana, and try things without worry. And she would do it then and there, and try to feed the dead elf to her book, which she knew usually spilled a lot of mana everywhere. The Book of Skeletons in general was constantly leaking mana fog when it was out. Comparatively, she could take a regular book in and out of her storage ring 100 times before using that much mana. Alright, let's eat the pills for the weird stat, and hope this doesn't make me more visible to the monster somehow. Chapter 257, Terms and Conditions. Sofia wanted to try eating the 3 pills at once, hoping that it would help her better feel the effects and understand what the processing stat did. It could be a bit dangerous though. But also I have 3 runes on, it's not like it's going to kill me 3 times over, even if there's some pill toxicity. At the same time, they will magically enhance my body, so I don't want it to emit too much mana. I'm going to have to take them one by one I guess, maybe I'll still see the difference anyway. Sofia ate the first of the small pills. They could seriously work on the taste a bit. She chewed and patiently waited for the pill to take effect, but she couldn't really feel any change, so she ate another one. Still nothing. After she had consumed all 3, she still had no idea what these could possibly do. Unsure what to make of this, she opened the book again. It was the same thing with the same unknown words, and yet, Sofia felt that she understood the meaning much easier now. How does that even work? It's like I think a bit better? Like a sudden burst of clarity, except that's my new baseline? No, more like I can focus harder. I can't quite put my finger on it. But that sure helps. I should be able to understand most of this book now, it's still just guessing for the most part, but it's easier now. So processing is like baseline intelligence in a way. The ability to understand things faster? I bet that'll help with modifying spells. Well, thank you very much for the timely reminder, Mr. Scribe. Onwards with the cryptic book, n/o/vel/b//in.c//om. Even with a simplified learning process, the book was still very technical and full of unknown words, but after spending half a day on it, Sofia was certain she could set up at least the mana isolation field without trouble. The shield looked like it was much harder to use, so much so that 3/4 of the book were dedicated only to it. First, insert an empty power core in the lower socket of the brass engine. To adjust the range, turn the thing below the third spiky wheel. After a good 3 minutes of fiddling with different buttons and dials all over the machine, Sofia finally heard a click which meant the engine was ready to start. Now all I have to do is insert at least 50,000 mana in there, preferably in a short time. So, either it works, and the mana isolation field hides the mana emissions, or I'm becoming a big beacon of mana for the elf monster and its swarm to collapse onto. I better double check that I set it all up correctly. It works. In a bubble around Sofia, contained inside the room, she could see the excess wastes of the mana she just used to start the engine, it was all trapped within. And now if I step out of it I can't see the mana. To think you can set up something like this anywhere. That's quite something. Finally, Sofia could dispel her unlife runes and watch her mana slowly come back up. It was only a quarter of the usual speed, because there was no ambient mana to fuel her regeneration. If I stay here to have the zone soak up my excess mana once I'm full, I can use it as a fast mana regeneration bubble later. I should make a small sun ritual circle inside while I'm at it. She's the employer, no reason for her not to help. After the ritual activated, her regeneration went up from about 86 to 102 points per second. Better than nothing. Finally, she could let Bookie loose without fear of it attracting the monster. The old elven corpse disappeared in the fog between the pages. Sofia grabbed the levitating book and inspected the newly formed page. As expected, it was a single elven skeleton, going for a measly 500 mana. Should I say it's worth 2.5 paladins, or rather a 20th of a Templar? Sofia summoned the skeleton. Like most other skeletons from the book, it did not move with an order. No weapon, not much magic, what is he? Solar Engineer Elf, LV 226. Engineer? Something to do with that thing being called a brass engine? The Zangdar hero did have an elven wife, so there is some kind of link. Didn't I see a similar word somewhere recently? I did, I'm pretty sure, like in an identify description. Oh yeah, that's it, the weird walls on the flying island was supposedly dwarven engineering. Walls have nothing to do with this engine contraption though. I might have been jumping to conclusions too fast. But, then, what can you do? Can you make walls? Were you the wall repairman or something like that? Annoying that I can't see its skills. Show me what you can do. But don't leave the bubble, and don't break the room. The skeleton executed the orders. It walked up to the seat that used to host its dead body and started with a light touch, disassembled it. It had only taken a few seconds, the previous elven design seat had become 3 neatly arranged piles of metal, stone, and leather, with a handful of nails and thick jagged nails on the side. It was still the same old materials in the same form, waiting to be reassembled. Interesting. Is that all? The skeleton proceeded to start drawing in empty space, its fingertip leaving behind luminous trails of unmoving light. The drawing of a chest appeared, and when the skeleton was done drawing, the light expanded and shot over the materials, sticking them together until they formed the same chest the skeleton had just drawn. A stone and metal chest with an interior lined in leather, complete with an integrated lock and assorted key. Interesting. Can you make anything as long as you have the materials? The skeleton didn't move, but Sofia understood that the answer was no. What about defending yourself? The skeleton disassembled the chest and drew a large shield and a rapier instead. Once assembled, it promptly equipped them. I see. The materials are really limiting. I'm guessing you can assemble some crazy stuff, because if not I don't see how you'd survive with just custom-made swords and shields. One thing she noted about the process was that the creation of items sometimes cut the materials into smaller pieces, but it didn't seem to be able to stick them back together. However, she could clearly feel that the sword and shield's relative power and toughness was much better than that of the base materials. They were infused with cyclical flows of mana, the same as her own spine sword whip. This is a great find. It won't be very useful in battle, but the quick manufacturing of items would make many craftsmen die of jealousy. It will no doubt be very useful, just not now. Great skeleton, terrible context. I wish it could tell me what its still living past him knew about the weird deep parasites. Why can't skeletons talk? Sofia hadn't yet unsummoned the Book of Skeletons, she felt it become agitated. What's up with you? It shook a bit and opened by itself, weakly ejecting a small piece of jewelry. A ring? Oh, I didn't even loot the corpse before feeding Bookie. He usually eats everything, so why spit out the ring? Ring of the Clean Hand. This silver ring has been imbued with fluid repellent magic. It prevents liquids from sticking to your hand. Pretty random, but I'll take it. Liquids already don't stick to my gloves though. I guess I'll give it to Alith. Now let's carve the runes again and go on a hunt. Sofia had first expanded the size of the mana isolation zone past the walls of the room before having the graveyard crew take her to the other side. Staring down the abandoned corridor, she immediately remembered being chased by the iridescent swarm and had a sudden urge to go back to the safety of her closed room. It's gonna be alright, these things aren't very intelligent or I'd be long dead. It'll be fine. The eternal silence of the solar station only added to the pressure she felt. Being deaf in such a dangerous environment was more terrifying than any monster shed here until then. With the place and the enemies being devoid of mana, her mana senses were also useless. She had to deal with 2 of her senses being cut out. Weirdly enough, she could still smell some faint odor of something burning when she was not even breathing, but that wasn't much information to go with. Probably just the smell of the sun? Sofia carefully made her way down to the lowest floor of the building. She followed her 3-dimensional map to the entrance walkway that linked this subsection to the main building. There were no windows anywhere, so this was the only way she could check on the outside without having to go through the walls. Still flying right above the sun, oh shit. Hey, sun, this is a bit too much, don't you think? From this new point of view, she had spotted something she hadn't noticed before. At the bottom tip of the inverted pyramid main building, there was what looked like a long pole going down, straight into the sun. Sofia had followed its path down with her gaze. It was hard to see up to where it really extended. Staring straight at the ball of fire and trying to see small details wasn't exactly easy even with protection. But the part that gave Sofia an existential crisis was not the pole itself, nor the sun beneath. It was the giant iridescent whale-like creature that swam at the surface of the sun for a second before fading under a sea of raging fire. She checked the quest again. Sun's Ordnance, meet Sun's Oracle in Herzl, defeat all monsters in the orbital Sun Temple. No. No, 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 no. It's not in the temple. It doesn't count. It cannot count. This thing is the size of a small city. I'm already having trouble dealing with a single small one. There's no way I'm supposed to get rid of that. Am I right? Please. Chapter 258, that's what she saw. Sofia was still at the door of the walkway. She had been staring at the sun until her eyes started to hurt, which wasn't too long, but the deep whale hadn't resurfaced. Maybe I saw wrong. Aha. Let's just say that I did. I need to focus on the small one first. There may be multiple even. If they took over every elf that was manning the temple except those that managed to end up like the engineer one I found. Let's hope there weren't too many personnel in this temple. Who am I kidding? This place is big enough to host hundreds of people, but I only saw one on the outside, so that's promising. They're clearly powerful enough to break the walls and doors, but they don't, so that's also good news. Perhaps if I just made a bone cube to hide into, they wouldn't even try to break it to get to me. I'm not going to try that though. I could try walling them off though. The range on Bone Dominus is only 22 meters, but if I hide behind a wall and use a fog skeleton as lure, well, one thing at a time. First, let's locate that thing again. Sofia walked back into the northern building, carving open a hole in a random room's door with her mithril weapon before returning to the walkway. She brought out the book and used the page with a single rat, unsummoned the book and ran back to hide further in the room shed just opened. Lords, I was so scared that it might be coming from behind me. As she hid, the rat quickly advanced, stopping in the middle of the walkway. Sofia really hoped that the elf monster wasn't in the same building as her anymore. If it had gone back to roaming on the path around the main building, not only did it mean she wasn't currently stuck in the same place the monster was, but also that she could reliably set up traps on the path the monster liked to return to. If it was just walking at random, then the situation would be a bit worse. It did not take long for the rat to move. It jumped on the spot once before running off to the main building. Bad news. If the monster came walking from the main building, the rat was to wait until it came close and jump into the sun. If not, then it was to lure it towards the main building. One jump before that meant that it had come from the sky, while 2 jumps meant that it was a swarm which came. It really came flying again. The rat should lure it away at least. I'll have an issue if that thing comes flying as soon as I try to use mana, but it took about 10 seconds to get here. I can work with that. I've seen with the dog that physical attacks were a desperate cause. If the whale is anything to go by, even the sun's temperature isn't a reliable way to kill them. What does that even leave me with? Trying to cast a bolt is just gonna give my position away, not counting the damage it would do to the temple. The rot would also attack the structure, so it's annoying to use. Oh, the rat jumped down. Good job, you survived quite a long time. Well. Let's return to my safe room and get to work. 28 days left. It took Sofia a good while to think about a proper plan and to set it up. She was currently in her safe room, but she had prepared a trapped room not far from there. Getting it right had been a tedious process. She had to make sure to lure away the monster first every time she wanted to use magic outside of her mana isolation zone. She couldn't expand it more despite having the enough power cores for that because she simply didn't have enough mana to fill them up. Not in a short time at least, and this trapped room was the only place near it where the architecture was right for her plans without tearing everything down. It was a relatively small room of about 7 meters long and large that she emptied by hand. She had checked the interior of nearby walls with her graveyard skeletons for any pipes that might get damaged before she pierced small holes leading to 2 other rooms and carved her own door to a 3rd room. There was also a hole in the ceiling that led to the outside, and more stuff she prepared on the side. Most importantly, every square centimeter of wall, floor, and ceiling in both this room and the adjacent ones were covered in a thin layer of smooth white bone. She left the safe room to go into one of the side rooms. From the small hole in the wall, she had a perfect view on the middle of the trapped room and the hole to the opposite side room. She had also replaced most of the floor's doors with bone doors, to make moving around easier and safer. Only the safe room she didn't touch, since it worked perfectly how it was. Her side room was partially covered by the mana isolation field's boundary, allowing her to hide inside it or to come out to use her magic on the other side if needed. Such a convoluted layout all for that one monster. I know now that it's dumb enough to follow the rat every time, so I can have it come here multiple times. That'll be really important. Unless the first plan works. Once more, she summoned the poor lonely rat out of the book, but along with the 3 Templars this time. The Templars stood unmoving inside of the isolation zone while the rat scampered at full speed through the air vents, down to the 1st floor and onto the open-air walkway, at the same spot he returned to every time. Without surprise, the elf abomination came flying, but for the first time, it was led inside of the northern pyramid. The rat led it through the corridors and up the stairs, luring it toward the trapped room. As the monster flew behind the rat, trying and failing to grab it multiple times due to its imprecise movements, Sofia and the Templars got in place. Sofia stayed inside of the isolation zone, channeling a piercing angel bolt with 1 Templar to her side. The second one took the bone doors to reach the opposite side room, and the third one was behind a door leading to the trapped room, ready to rush in if need be. The Templar on the opposite side's job was to leverage his invincibility that came from the sunlight leaking into the room through a hole in the ceiling that Sofia had made. He was to intercept the bolt should it somehow go through the elf, to avoid destroying the elven machinery that was unfortunately on the other side in the next room. The rat entered the trapped room. The elf and his iridescent parasitic deep puppet master followed. Sofia stepped out of the isolation zone, the monster was lined up with the hole in front of her. She released the angel's bolt. The precautions to intercept the bolt with the Templar proved useful. The bolt crashed into the elf's torso, carving a hole straight through and coming out from the other side and into the Templar's raised sword. What exactly? The elf was pierced, but the parasite inside of it was unharmed. It was as if the bolt had phased through it like Sofia liked to phase through walls. Sofia was a bit unsettled by the unforeseen result, but she proceeded with her plans nonetheless. Out of her storage ring and directly over the elf, she summoned a bone cage, blessed by Bone Dominus, and had the ground of the trapped room instantly open up slightly to let it slide into it, locking it in place. With the monster trapped, she activated Heal Undead. The pillar of light formed in the void on the outside, shining onto the roof, and streaming into the trapped room by the hole in the ceiling. The dried and cracked corpse of the elf was instantly covered in rot. But once again, the creature inside seemed unharmed, the holy light bouncing off of its iridescent skin like it hit many small mirrors, dispersing it in every direction. Nov. L. B //JNN. Sofia was happy that her precautions against her own attacks worked, the Templars soaking up the bolt and the bone-covered walls being protected against the rot. But she couldn't say the same about the success of her experiment. The parasite slid out of its host body, leaving the dead elf behind. Sofia saw a glimpse of the monster's true form as it fled, sliding through the bars of the cage. If she correctly understood what she saw, the monster was actually a larger version of the bulbous spider-like things that made the swarm. The only difference was that the top of the bulb had bloomed into the constantly expanding and contracting honeycomb structure that birthed the little swarmlets. The parasite fled and Sofia also followed her protocol in case of the monster's escape. She ran to the back wall and used the graveyard skeletons to phase right back into her safe room. She trembled in disgust as she pictured the parasite sliding out of the dead elf's body again and again in her mind. Yet, deep inside, she rejoiced. The trap room hadn't been worthless. For the first time, the monster had fled. Chapter 259, Blood Runs Deep. 26 days remaining. Sofia was having a hard time. Forcing the monster out of the elf's body had been a mistake. Before then, it was still quite slow when it walked, and predictable. It used to follow the rat Sofia used as a lure without fail. Now its behavior had completely changed. It had never stepped into the trapped room again, and didn't follow the rat. Instead, it ran around the corridors, fleeting from hiding spot to hiding spot. It was impossible to keep track of it, and it had just ambushed the rat. Shit, I lost connection. The book of skeletons shivered in her hand. It opened by itself, showing the page of the rat. The page burst up in smoky blue flames and burned down in an instant. The rat's page was gone. No. My skeleton. That's not, they can do that. I was right to be wary from the start. What now? Does that mean the rat is a beehive thing too now? I hope it didn't keep Sun's blessing if it is. Dealing with a single one is hard enough. This better have been worth it. The rat getting caught wasn't a simple byproduct of Sofia inattention, it was actually another experiment of hers. The skeleton rats in general had no combat skills whatsoever, but they were very smart, fast, and uncannily aware of their surroundings. It was no coincidence it had managed to evade the deep creature's grasp until now. Though I would have liked it better if I didn't lose it. The goal of the experiment was to try coating the monster with some of the black shade dust that had been in her storage ring for a while. It seemed attacks like the angel's bolt went straight through the monster's iridescent body, but the rot-spreading holy light had actually been reflected by its skin when it was in the trap room. So if Sofia could just cover its skin with something more conducive to the light, she might be able to cover the monster with rot. In her downtime while the rat worked in tandem with the engineer skeleton to create powder-splashing traps and spread them around, she had been practicing to get the spell version of Heal Undead. To have more control over the rot spread would allow her to avoid hitting the temple by accident, and might also allow her to use it in restricted spaces. It wasn't quite there for now, but there was progress. In Sofia's opinion, both her experience with tampering skills and the effects of the processing pills were helping her progress fast. Fast enough that she had good hopes to get this done in just a few more days instead of months. It also helped that the magic behind Heal Undead was quite simple, but thinking about that would lower her sense of accomplishment. So far the shade dust traps had all failed. At first she thought the monster was simply too fast to get hit, but by going herself and exploring from as far as she could stand, she had seen why her traps never worked. The powder simply flew through the monster like the angel bolt had. As if the creature was not of this world, a ghost, of sorts. Sofia had missed it because until then, the elf had been actively interacting with the world around it, mostly by trying to grab the rat. For some reason it still walked on the ground and never tried to go through walls, but it certainly wasn't a physical entity anymore. Not entirely, at least. To grab the rat, it would have to be somewhat physical, was Sofia's hypothesis. So she let the rat get caught. During the time that it touched the rat, it would have been sprayed by a nice rain of black shade dust. If that could actually stick to its skin, there were two possibilities. If it had brought the powder with it into its own dimension, which was probably the deep, chances were that she could now touch that with the light and spread the rot. If not, then maybe being covered in the powder would force it to stay fluffy in the physical plane, in which case she could probably actually pierce it with a bolt now. The worst case scenario would be if it shed the powder as soon as it stopped being a physical entity. The next day, Sofia had confirmed that the rat had indeed become host of a small iridescent honeycomb. As luck would have it, skeletons weren't great hosts for the monsters. The rat was in fact exactly where the ambush had taken place. The creature was growing inside the skull, but the magic which kept the bones together had faded. So the actual host of this newborn deep creature was not a rat skeleton but a rat skull. It looked like the small host prevented the creature from developing correctly, its many spider-like legs were weak and wobbly, unable to even lift it. It was also covered in sparse patches of black powder, just like the ground around it. N/O/vel/B/JN.C//OM. It grew small tentacular wings when Sofia approached, which seemed to come at a cost, as the honeycomb instantly shriveled to a size smaller than it already was. Perith was quick to appear and used his chains of the four seals to restrain it. The magical chains of light were one of the many things Sofia had tested for rot conductivity while she was stuck inside of her safe room. The conclusion was, the chains can spread the rot through direct contact. The rot grew on the ground where the chains sprouted from, but that couldn't be avoided. More importantly, they were firmly grabbing the monster. It works! It works! It works! Sofia wanted to yell, but her lungs were still desperately empty. She was enthralled by the cathartic sight of the tiny honeycomb monster shriveling under the attack of the rot. The monster contained no mana to feed the rot, so it was instantly getting consumed instead. Though the rot wouldn't survive for long without a mana source to feed on, the monster was still small enough to get consumed entirely 10 times over. Soon, it popped like a bubble, weakly dumping its liquid contents all over the floor. Sofia jumped back to avoid being touched by the sudden splash, but the liquid did not look especially dangerous. It had the same iridescent property as the monster, and seemed a bit more viscous than water. Deep blood? Sofia was torn between taking a sample, trying to get rid of the liquid, or simply leaving it there. Parith's appearance and his skill as well as the rot had all used mana. The other monster knew their current location now, so they couldn't dally. In the end, she left the blood as is and fled as fast as she could. Sitting in a bone chair in the safe room once again, Sofia's smile of victory did not last long. She was almost out of the black true shade dust. She reread its description again. True shade dust, the remains of a purified true shade killed by holy light. Can be used to fuel rituals, brew potions, or dye clothing and armor. Does not reflect any light. Highly flammable while in powder form, store with caution. I still have plenty of the white version, but it says that it scatters all light instead of not reflecting any. That's the exact opposite of what I want to do. I just need them to absorb the light. As it is, I can probably have engineer skeleton to make 3 more traps, maybe double that if I go around trying to sweep the remains of the previous traps. Maybe I could use the carbon that's left behind by the rot. It won't consume the bones I've touched, but I can still eat the blood from summoned blood, so I can technically get an infinite amount. It's a black powder too, but it's more shiny. Perhaps it would still work as a good replacement. In fact, maybe just covering the monsters in blood could work. It's kind of funny that I killed the shades by splashing them with silver water, and used their remains to throw at other monsters to kill them. If I collect the deep blood, can I throw it at something else to kill it? Keep the chain running? Is that the kind of thing I find fun now? I used to be into reading books. The stress is getting to me, I think. I really hate the damn silence of this place. The sun is like a big giant explosion, for hell's sake. It has no rights being so silent. These last 2 years really did some damage to my personality, didn't they? Well, actually it was weird from the start. I never exactly had what I'd call a normal life. I should take a break after this. If Saria is safe with a dragon, then she can wait a bit. If anything, she should be the one coming to help me. She's not the one who's gonna die in a few weeks. She probably would come, if only she knew. I hope the others are doing better. Chapter 260, The Little Things. The throwables are ready. Sofia was already taking a liking to the engineer skeleton. She could just give him a bunch of bones and random crap from her storage ring and he would make useful items out of it in a few minutes. It seemed the items made like this were limited to non-magical, but this was already great. Right now she was playing with her 8 shade dust balls. Now I just have to throw it at the thing and it'll be covered in dust. Then I blast it with the light. Her training with Heal Undead had reached an interesting threshold. She could now cast it pretty much anywhere and in any direction, no matter the available space. But if she did, it was locked as a 10m large beam of light. Though it wasn't as good as she hoped, it was good enough for the purpose of the quest. She had done some testing, and thanks to the lack of mana in the temple, the rot wouldn't survive long after being applied. A flash of the light would apply enough rot to eat through about a centimeter of the temple's walls. As long as she didn't overuse it in a single area or hit the mechanical elven structures that kept the whole thing afloat above the sun, she would be all right. She wanted to believe that, at least, because with barely more than 600 hours left to finish the quest, she couldn't spend forever customizing the Heal Undead spell. And if a single flash is not enough to kill the parasite, I lure it or chase it to somewhere else that the rot hasn't damaged yet and blast it again. Rinse and repeat until it dies. Then again for every parasite in the temple. Surely I can get that done in 600 hours. The temple is big but not that big. And there was only one of these things outside, perhaps the inside will be mostly empty too. That would be nice. I need to make sure of where the trajectory correction module and the emergency power supplier, spreading rot on those would be my last mistake. But for now, let's go out. Sofia phased out of the safe room and instantly summoned the 4 vampire skeletons out of her book. These were her pick for the chasing and luring of the parasite. They had proved to be extremely fast and agile, which was exactly what she needed right now. They would stay at a reasonable distance from her and each other when possible, with her as the center of the formation. Sofia's safety was their first priority, then luring the parasite of the deep came second. She also had her 3 runes up, as she did every time she stepped out of the mana isolation zone. The walk out of the northern section was silent as usual. Sofia was tense, ready to fire off a beam of light at the slightest sign of a vampire getting attacked, but nothing came to find them. On the way out, they passed near the abandoned rat skeleton. The iridescent liquid was still around it, untouched. Sofia tentatively took the skeleton book out, but it did not want to eat the rat again. The opening leading to the outside walkway came into view. The first vampire skeleton was about to step outside when it suddenly turned back and tackled Sofia. There was a second of shock, but she was quick to process that the skeleton was protecting her. Their loyalty was never in question. She trusted the skeleton. In the time it took her to fall, she concentrated to resist the influence of Way of the Fool, which would prevent her from being tackled to the ground, activated the Iridian Rot, and sent a ray of light from the place the skeleton had been standing directed toward her. I can't hit the footbridge no matter what. Sofia saw a swarm of the small parasites fly over her and the skeleton vampire which was pinning her down. They were not covered in rot. Fuck. Perith appeared. He was the one holding on to 7 out of the 8 dust balls. He threw one at the vampire standing at the back. The vampire struck the ball right as the swarm reached its level. Sofia activated the light again. The swarm was consumed by the rot before it could even turn back, showering the corridor and the vampire in its iridescent blood. Sofia felt the world slow down for an instant, wondering what would happen of the tainted vampire. At first sight, nothing. Since it was like this, she refocused on more immediate matters like the one Perith had been dealing with, making sure she was safe. Although a vampire had immediately gone to check outside after Sofia killed the swarm, it came back without a sign of finding anything. N/O/vel/b/jn.c//om. The parasite is getting crafty. It's no longer just ambushing me but sending its goons at me directly from a distance. And that was without a doubt an entire swarm, not just part of it. I know you can't do that too often, parasite. You messed up. Perith, come back for now. Wet skeleton, you go first. The other 3, keep an eye on him, just in case. We run through the outside fast. We need to find the parasite before it can recover and send a swarm again. Sofia brought out the book of skeletons again, and summoned the group of 100 rats. 25 in each inverted pyramid. Don't go inside of the big one, just scout the outside, fast. Just to be certain she wasn't getting bamboozled, she even sent a quarter of the rats to check on the north pyramid she was just leaving. It wasn't too long until the rats found traces of the parasite. It was on the rooftop of the main pyramid, the exact place where she had met with Afinareth before. It'll take 3 good minutes to run there. I can't wait that long. This thing can fly too. I could jump up there if not for the increased gravity. No choice. Come back out, Perith. Get ready to throw the balls. We're going all out. The runes on Sofia's torso lit up under her armor, then her wings lit up as well. She was already at less than half her total mana. If she wanted to be able to use the rot, along with the 3rd stage of Rune-Forged Overlord, she could only afford for the entire confrontation to last a few seconds. The only issue in this plan was that if the parasite didn't choose to become physical to attack, she wouldn't be able to cover it with the shade dust, but she had an idea for that as well, though it was a risky gamble. With who knew how many more parasites and possibly a giant whale to kill in a very short time, she couldn't keep taking as little risks as she had been until then. Now was the time for real progress. Due to the 3rd tier of Rune-Forged Overlord, Sofia and her skeletons all gained a mountain of stats as well as omnidirectional free flight. Lack of air and mana be damned, I can fly too. Sofia, Perith, the 4 vampire, and a bunch of rats all flew straight to the top of the main inverted pyramid of the temple. The parasite was there, its wings still deploying while it ran away in the opposite direction. She started channeling the graveyard of the righteous as she flew up. There's nowhere you can go. Sofia was many times faster than the parasite. She flew over it, dumping tons of bones out of her armor's storage on her way. Stopping at the maximum range of Bone Dominus, she controlled the bones to close around the parasite like a bone coffin. The graveyard skeletons all started emerging from the ground around it, clawing at and into it. If the parasite was anywhere in the physical or spiritual plane, they would catch it. Sofia could clearly feel the parasite push back against the bones. It was at least partially in the physical plane already. Some of the graveyard skeletons managed to grab its legs. The parasite forcefully cracked the bones from the inside. It fought back, destroying some of the graveyard skeletons, and freeing itself of the bone coffin, darting out of it like a magical bolt. It had even severed some of its legs to escape the grasp of the skeletons it couldn't get rid of in that short instant. Fully deploying its wings, it took off, only to be squarely hit on its globulous body by a small bone ball full of shade dust as soon as it was about to take flight. Sofia hit it with a ray of light. Then she hit it with another, angled in another direction, to make sure the rot wouldn't touch the same part of the roof twice. She did this in all directions until the rot drew a perfect circle around the parasite. Flickering heal undead so many times only took a second. This was her fastest spell casting to date. The parasite was thoroughly covered in a thick, veiny, pulsating layer of rot. It couldn't fly anymore. The parasite struggled. It reminded Sofia of the ebb-covered leaf going mad inside Nicet's glass ball. Then the struggling stopped. Is it dead? Chapter 261, Some Bloody Respite. The shrinking ball of rot shook once. Then twice, then thrice, and finally, it imploded, collapsing on itself. The shrunken rot consumed its remaining matter in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only a small puff of carbon powder. One down. Sofia was overjoyed. She smiled at Perith who had landed below her. Then she ran out of mana and fell like a bag of sand. Right. Forgot about that. She expected to hit the ground, which wouldn't hurt her that much anymore. What was a 10 meters fall to someone of her level? But Perith was ready to catch her. In one smooth motion, he helped her land softly on her 2 feet. Thanks a lot, she thought, turning her head back to look into Perith's flaming eyes of holy light. I'm sure you must be smiling too. Sofia was on the bridge walkway leading to the eastern part of the temple. Her rats had confirmed one thing: all areas they could access were parasite-free. But they had found a few other things, which she needed to check out by herself. These included 2 inaccessible rooms in the eastern building where she was heading, and one in the western one. Once she cleared all the side pyramids, only the main building of the temple would be left. It was by far the largest chunk of the place, and by the look of it, it was currently completely sealed. She had found out that even the vents were fully blocked and locked with strange non-magical protection that she couldn't quite grasp. Her understanding of it was that there had probably been some kind of emergency lockdown, though it failed to save the elves. They must have locked themselves with a parasite of Ormancleath already in their midst, just like the Zangdar citizens had been locked away in the margin with Phagiids. At least now I can walk outside safely. If I forget about the whale. Sofia hadn't caught sight of the whale again after the first time, but the thought of possibly needing to face off against it still haunted her. Hopefully it wouldn't have to come to that. Making her way to the building, Sofia really questioned what could have possibly compelled the elves to design such a weird temple. She didn't need any knowledge in architecture to understand that these flimsy thin walkways connecting actual pyramids with no additional support of any kind anywhere was a terrible idea. The missing southern building only reinforced that sentiment. The eastern building was eerily similar to the northern one, same layout, same empty rooms everywhere. Some were labeled this time, elven inscriptions written over the doors, names such as dry storage or secondary infirmary. All desperately empty. The oracle did say the temple was only running for 3 days before the attack. Then Sun sent a rescue crew and never heard back from them. I wish they had given me a number of elves to find. How many people in the initial and rescue crews? 10? 20? 100? Sofia followed a group of skeleton rats to the first closed and barricaded room. It was in a far corner of the lowest floor. This time her scouting method was to send a rat inside by way of graveyard skeletons. Looks like it's safe. Oh shit. This one isn't going to work for the book. There was a single elf on the floor, back against the corner of the room. She had visibly decided to go on her own terms. She had probably used magic. There was nothing left of her skull except for a large and dried black blood stain on the walls. To have the resolve to choose to go like this, she must have been more than terrified. It's a few thousand years late, but I apologize in the name of the deep. May you find peace in the afterlife. I never even believed in an afterlife other than as an undead, but who knows? What even happens to the soul when I shouldn't get sidetracked? Back to the quest. The other blocked room should be where one of the modules is. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om This room was worse than the one before. There had been 3 elves locked together in the small space. Their bodies told of a grim tale. Conflict claiming a life. Cannibalism claiming another one. Suicide claiming the last. As for why they had never tried to leave, the answer was only a few meters outside of the room. It took the form of the shredded, hollow body of an elf, whose parasite had left its host for another one. Traces of battle marked the walls around the corpse. Like an elven shell. The opposite of a skeleton. Just looking at it. Sofia had seen her fair share of disturbing scenes by now, but the dried and empty husk of an elf smothered across the floor was enough to almost make her puke. And that was without even being able to smell it. Hell! The parasite was waiting for them outside of the room. One of them left and got instantly ambushed. He fought back, destroyed the parasite's previous host, forcing it to leave it like I did. Except he became the new host. The one I destroyed myself in the trap room. And then what happened inside happened. I can already tell the only usable skeleton will be the one of the woman who got killed for her meat, probably not a warrior class, I assume. Go on, have your meal, bookie. Now I need to find the model manual. The machinery in there was different and more chaotic compared to the one in the flare protection module room. It took Sofia a few seconds of looking around pipes to find the glass case she was looking for. It looked exactly like the one from the other room. Do not open without permission. Yeah, still the same. And the book life support module models. Interesting one, but not what I was looking for. It looks intact, I think. The issue is still the low overall power though. I need to activate the main or secondary power supply if I want to use this. Haven't found any of that though. It's probably in the main building. The book of skeleton was done eating. Sofia quickly searched the bodies in the room for anything useful, without success. Then she looked at her book's new page. An elf holding a broom, for 1000 mana. 1,000? That's 5 paladins. But it's one elf with a broom. Sofia just had to try out her new summon on the spot. Solar Sun Nun, LV 226. She really has a broom. Where does the broom come from? Health, 1300/1300. Stamina, 56,500/56,500. Mana, 13,000/13,000. Lifetime, 16,527s/16,543s. And these definitely are some interesting stats. Too bad stamina is useless to skeletons. I suppose she must have a lot of speed, strength, or agility, and that's how it ends up like this. Exactly the same case as the vampires, they have a lot of useless stamina but they're really fast. Speaking of which, I should check up on the one who got splashed by the deep blood. It cleaned itself, but who knows what the thing could have done to him. The vampire skeleton in question was currently guarding one of the stair access to this floor, like the other 3 were doing along with a bunch of rats. Just because they hadn't found more parasites didn't mean Sofia had stopped being careful in her movements. Since the skeleton still had almost 3 hours of lifespan, she would use them until the last second. Checking on it, the vampire still looked like nothing was going on with it. I'll have to go back and collect some samples of the liquid. Can wait though, stuff doesn't really decompose here for some reason. Anyway, western side is next, then. The one closed room in the western pyramid turned out to be blocked by design this time. It was a storage room for food, containing a dozen crates of dried fish, fruits, and nuts. Whoa! No way! This food is older than the system. How crazy is that? Can I eat it? Sofia grabbed a wrinkled dried opera out of its shiny paper wrapping. It's all bone dry, but they still look good as new beyond that. All individually packed and all. I'm just not too sure it's safe to consume that. Actually. What if it isn't? My body literally doesn't even need food anymore, and I could probably survive most poisons in existence just with the combined regenerative power from the blessed constructs and radiance. I still won't tempt it now, but... Sofia took half of the crates. I'll leave some for whoever Sun sends here after I'm done. Done with her pilfering, she realized she was still holding the dried opera in her hand. Its wrinkly brown skin that looked like a dirty brain wasn't exactly the most appetizing, but Sofia hadn't eaten anything in a week, and she was awfully curious. Just one bite can't hurt. It's so sweet. And so dryyyyyy. Where did I store this damn water stone? Here it is good Oh. Right. Doesn't work in the void without air. Yet. No water in the air to channel into the stone if there's no air, day. Fuck, my throat is so dry it hurts. Sofia eyed her status screen. Summon blood. Chapter 262, Survivor. Doors module models. Well, that's it for the western building then. Only the center left. Before finally entering the main temple, Sofia still had two things to do. First she had to check the broken walkway to the missing south building. At first her theory had been that it might have been destroyed by the parasites, but upon closer inspection, it did not look like that was the case. The break on the walkway was a straight line where it seemed to have been molten. Can't imagine the parasite doing that. This material is pretty resistant to heat, so to melt it like this. My guess is that an elf did this, but why? Maybe they wanted to escape by separating themselves from the main temple. Wouldn't that send them straight into the sun, though? Or it could have been a way to get rid of some parasites. If they knew some infected people were in the south wing, I could see that. The last option is that other deep creatures are inside the temple and have strong thermal attacks. That could be an issue. Still, I don't think so. So far the parasite never attacked the structure of the temple directly, even when that could have let it catch me. It seems they're unwilling to destroy it for some reason. Maybe it's just self-preservation? Sofia was about to leave the broken walkway when the skeleton with her broom tapped on Sofia's shoulder and pointed at a random point in the void above. What's it this time, showing me the planet like Afinareth? She looked in the direction the skeleton was pointing at, not seeing anything at first, but the skeleton's finger was actually moving rather fast, it was already pointing somewhere else. Following the direction, she managed to see something move. It was quite far away, but not that much, maybe a few 100 kilometers. The reflections of the sun actually made it easily visible once you knew where to look. Really? That's where the southern pyramid is, orbiting further away? It's moving quite fast too. There's no real reason or way to try to get on it. But a neat find. She wasn't going to think about it more than she needed to. Next she went to retrieve the power core engine from her safe room. It had to be turned off first to avoid damaging it, because of something about spatial instability. She set it up near a wall of the lowest floor of the main temple, and entered from there with the graveyard skeletons. To be safe she had a single rune on, and the other skeletons were waiting outside at the moment. It feels natural to start from the bottom. It's also the smallest floor. The entire lowest floor was a single large room. At first glance, no corpse, no monster from the deep, only a giant incomprehensible machine of cables, gears, tubes and other mechanical contraptions. It's not working. Is that the main power supply maybe? It'd do me good to turn that on if so. I wonder why it's off in the first place. Well, I need to make sure the place is safe first. Go on, move the rats over. The graveyard skeletons were quick to grab the rats from one side and release them around Sofia, still inside of the mana isolation zone. When they were all there, she gave the deployment order. The rats ran everywhere and quickly found air vents to go up to the higher floors. There were probably regular stairs somewhere, but with all the doors of the temple being closed, they didn't find them. The floor above this one seems to have more room. No elf sightings so far. The rats all disappeared before reaching the next floor. End of lifespan, well, good enough for now, no parasites nearby. Sofia brought out the book of skeletons and summoned the engineer elf. Since your class is to mess with mechanical stuff, surely you would have been one of the people in charge of this thing, right? So fix it. Or turn it on if it is not broken. The elf left the isolation zone and approached the giant machine. To Sofia's surprise, the elf nun with her broom also followed. In a strange cooperation, the engineer seemed to give orders to the nun, pointing at stuff in multiple parts of the room. They can work together like the High Priest and the Templars. Nice. I hope Sun won't mind if I steal a few more elves. After 2 long hours of tinkering with the beast of a machine, the elven engineer pulled down a big lever, and the entire temple shook. The machine started moving, the gears spun around, its tubes filled with blue light. Lightning? This looks exactly like the bolts. Not too far from her, a screen turned on, showing the same lines she had read in the teleporter room. It was still the exact same. Then the line main power supply changed from offline to online. Would you look at that? Good work, skeleton. Other lines started updating, one by one, the modules turning on one by one, going from low, to medium, to high power for some. All except for one, defense system, which stubbornly stayed off. Finally, Air. The room had rapidly suddenly changed from empty and silent to full of fresh air and extremely noisy. The machine was too loud for Sofia to hear her own voice, yet she was happy to finally hear anything at all. Station Power Supply Control Panel. Power Supply Status. Main Power Supply Online. Secondary Power Supply Offline. Emergency Power Supply Offline. Current Module Status. Trajectory Correctors High Power. Temperature Regulation Med Power. Doors Med Power. Life Support High Power. Defense System Offline. Transmission Platform Med Power Nov, L, B //JNN. Flare Protection High Power. Finally some real progress. Sound. Air. Smell. Ah, this feels so much better already. The air is still weirdly stale, it's the lack of mana doing that. The Oracle did say that mana messes with the machinery here. Haven't really seen it so far. But maybe I should be careful not to use too much magic in this room, I guess. Shit, actually, quick. Sofia ran up to the screen and pressed the minus button next to the doors line twice. Doors offline. Much better. Don't want the parasites to escape and start roaming outside. It's reassuring to know no matter how many there are, they're all confined here. I can redirect the power I took from the doors, let's see. Defense system? Sofia pressed the button, but that module didn't want to turn on. Broke in? Ah, it's probably the one from the southern wing. Too bad, no defense system then. I guess I'll push everything else except the doors to high power then. Looking over the entire screen again, something attracted Sofia's attention. Weird, the emergency power supply turned off by itself? Not that I need more anyway. The 100 rats were summoned again. Sofia's plan was to create another three-dimensional map. She sent 3 of the rats to start with, as that was the limit of what she could follow previously, but now the task of tracking their movement and sculpting the maquette was exceptionally easy. She understood after wondering what had changed that it was due to the processing pills she had eaten. It helped with concentrating on all tasks, not just understanding books. She sent more rats one by one, finding that her new limit was about 15 of them at once, greatly increasing the speed at which she mapped out the temple. The rats did not report anything special from the 2nd floor, but one of them self-dispelled on the 3rd floor. That's our first parasite. Avoid that area, continue exploring. There was something else of interest in the 3rd floor, a rather large area completely walled off with no vents that the rats couldn't enter. Not paying it any mind for now, Sofia kept mapping the 3rd then 4th floor. The 4th floor had the same closed area at the same place. No parasites were found anywhere this time. I wonder what that middle area is to go through multiple levels. The 5th floor, again, had the same closed-off central area, and the rats found another supposed parasite. The 6th floor was uneventful, and the 7th, largest floor had 2 small closed rooms as well as 1 potential parasite. After the map was finished, these rats all self-dispelled. They couldn't come back down and risk leading the deep parasites to Sofia. Only 3 of them. Maybe a few more in the closed room, but perhaps only these 3 and the quest is done. The layout is a bit confusing, but I can deal with it now that I have a map. I should probably separate the floors though, this sculpture is hard to look at as is. This should be easy enough, I know how to deal with them now. And I have enough shade dust for them all. As long as it's the same kind of monster. I wonder what Ormoncleith thinks about me hunting its minions. I have Afinoreth's approval, but still. Ready to go on a hunt, Sofia stepped out of the mana isolation field. Help! Please! Help! Like a scream broadcasted directly into her mind, Sofia couldn't escape the mind-wrenching cries for help from a crackling, distorted, elvish-speaking voice. The painful headache made her stumble. She took a step back into the isolation field, and the scream ceased. What the fuck was that? Chapter 263, Lost Souls. There was a survivor? That wasn't in the contract. Did an elf survive here alone for 3,000 fucking years? Are we doing a Zire Volume 2? I've had enough of this crap once. What is it with people surviving in shitty places every time? Seriously, every single damn time. The Dread Apostle, the Dominion Apostles, Zire, that's a lot of demons actually. Ugh. Fine. I'll go save whoever again. It's only been lucrative ventures so far. Sofia took a single step out of the isolation field. Help. Holy, can you stop fucking screaming? Help. No way that worked. I understood the first 3 times. Help! What? Oh, maybe they only understand Elvish. Even if they got that, I wanted them to stop screaming. I can understand it fine, speaking though. Trying her best to remember the sections about pronunciation that she had schemed through when studying the book on Elvish, Sofia tried her best to say something intelligible in Elvish. Can you hear? I hear. Why only try to talk now? Emergency supply. You actually, I'm not even gonna ask. Who are you, how can I help? Power. Don't really know stuck. Extremely helpful. Come. Emergency supply. Alright, anything useful you can tell me? Danger. Son, better pay me extra for this one. The Elvish voice stopped after that, leaving Sofia alone with the sound of the rumbling machine all around her. But even that felt wrong, there was something else going on. A symphony of fast clicks. Crap. The swarm. Sofia hurriedly dispelled her rats, and called upon the graveyard skeletons to take her and the engineer to the outside. Narrowly avoided that one. I can actually hear them now. They're much less scary like that. Sofia's plan now included tried to rescue whoever the person that called her was, though it would be the last thing on her list. The quest took priority, her own life before that of others. So, since her last known position to the parasites was the bottom floor, she would next start from the top. Supposedly there was already a parasite up there, it would be her first target. And I still can't fly. Why does Mana have to conflict with these electric power supply things? Pretty annoying. I even saw it flicker when I used the graveyard to get out. Such a weird notion. How does Mana conflict with electricity? I use Mana to make electricity all the time and it's very stable. The image of a giant ball of blue fire came back to haunt Sofia's memory for a second. Maybe not so stable, all right. Did I just understand the secret of the Angel's Bolt's destructive power? Wouldn't that make all lightning mages very strong? Are there lightning mages actually? I think Nisid mentioned something about them. I'm getting sidetracked again. Happens often recently. Let's just walk to the top floor. Sofia was in one of the 7th floor's closed rooms. She had entered through the ceiling, finding nothing but a bunch of gold in there. This was clearly some kind of vault. Now, why would the elves need so much gold in an isolated temple orbiting around the sun? She didn't know. But she knew that now it was her gold. There were coins and ingots, she didn't bother counting them, and cleaned the place completely. If Sun has any complaint, she can give me a better briefing next time. One that includes details like the mention of parasites from the deep or the presence of survivors to rescue. She left through the ceiling again, walked on the roof to the other closed room and phased directly inside again. And another dead elf, can't tell what happened to this one, dehydration maybe? They're all dry like blocks of sand anyway. Welcome to the book, well, check your skills later. Back up on the roof, she went over to the spot the parasite had been spotted by the rats, which was actually right under where she killed the previous parasite. Her rod had eaten through an uneven layer of 1 to 2 centimeters of the strange material that made the pyramid, nowhere near enough to pierce through the ceiling to the floor under. Every external wall, floor, and ceiling in the temple was at least half a meter thick. As her page with the one rat was no longer part of the book, Sofia summoned the next best thing, the skeleton dog. She had the graveyard skeletons drop it directly on the last known position of the 7th floor's parasite. He's just moving, no parasite then, search for it, I'm following from above. While the dog ran around the floor, searching, Sofia used the last of the book's fog to summon the group of 25 paladins. First the dog would spot the parasite, then the paladins would drop down on it through the ceiling and pile up onto it to prevent it from moving. I call this move, the dog pile. Then Parath would go down also, throw a shade dust ball at the thing and activate his halo. Sofia would stay safe above and just activate her rot for a second or two and repeat that until the thing was dead. The only bad part was that this would spread a lot of rot inside of the temple, but now she had a good idea of the layout and the size of the module machines. She knew that as long as she kept the rot to the corridors, she wouldn't hit anything important, especially with all doors still closed. N/O/vel/b//in.c//om. In a matter of seconds, the dog found the parasite. Or rather, the parasite found the dog, the paladins weren't even fully formed. Sofia had the dog run away until the paladins were ready and in place, and when the dog led the parasite to the spot where they were waiting, they phased through the ceiling as planned. Everything else went according to plan. 20 mere seconds later, another parasite was gone. and Sofia never had to come close to it. One of the paladins had been smashed to bits, but besides that, she was astonished that her plan had worked so well. That never happened. It was worth it to spend so much time understanding how they worked with the first one. Let's quickly get rid of the rest. The other two parasites fell to the same fate, too slow to even release their swarms as the army of paladins threw themselves on them. The parasites still within their elven shells always tried to defend themselves with physical attacks first, and that was their downfall. They could kill a paladin or two at the start, but it was rapidly over after that. That's it for the main temple, but the quest is not complete. So there's more inside of the last closed section spanning 3 floors, or it counts the whale and I'm dead. Who knew I'd hope to find more parasites? I'm guessing the elf who called me is stuck in there too. Might as well go while the paladins still have a lot of lifespan, but I need to dispel the rune and regenerate some man first. I'm running low. Now, should I start from the top or from the bottom? Sofia was on the 6th floor, about to drop the dog into the closed-off section of the floor below. If there were more parasites, she wasn't about to change a winning tactic. Ormoncleath probably just dropped one parasite and it reproduced. Only one monster causes so much chaos. I didn't find any fighters among the elves except the one who became the first parasite I killed. There weren't very many of them to begin with. I'm starting to believe the rescue crew the Oracle spoke of never even reached the temple in the first place. Or maybe they're all in there. Your time to shine again, good dog. Wagging its skeletal tail, the dog let itself be grabbed by the graveyard skeletons. Sofia let it run around on the highest floor for a few minutes, nothing came of it, so she went down too. Looks safe. Another module, let's see trajectory correctors. So this is the thing that's been keeping me alive all this time. Thank the lords there's no parasite in here. I'm guessing in one of the other 2 levels I'll find the temperature regulation module too. Without further ado, the dog was sent down once again. There were maybe stairs somewhere nearby, but Sofia couldn't be bothered to look for them. The dog died before hitting the ground. Sofia felt its page forcefully ripped from the book. No. Again. Fuck. Whatever did this, you're dead. Chapter 264, The Sofia Way. Sofia had to stop herself from phasing down into the unknown room. Her blood boiled, but her brain battered her with the image of the orphanage and the paladins. The murder list. The Templar dying at her hand in incomprehension. The situation was different, but the root of the problem was the same. She had to keep her calm in situations like these. Tone down her emotions not to make a fatal mistake. To avoid doing things she would regret, were she still able to. She was going to avenge her dog for sure, but putting her own life at risk for that was not the way. Anywhere else and against a different enemy, she might have just activated her demon form and shredded everything around, then and there. She even had an unlife rune on, the risk would have been acceptable. But both the unstable nature of the temple and the danger the deep parasites posed couldn't be underestimated. This time, especially, the dog's page had disappeared extremely fast, much too fast for it to be the regular parasites to send their swarm to corrupt it. Whatever was down there could do the same thing almost instantly. That, and the trajectory corrector machine in the room where Sofia was standing was the only thing keeping the temple from going diving into the sun. I'll send one of the graveyard guys. One of the graveyard skeletons made its way down the thick floor and pocketed its skull out of the ceiling on the floor under. Sofia felt it get shattered not half a second later. Physical attack. Couldn't parasite the skeleton because it was entirely a monoconstruct, as expected. Next 2, different sides, synchronous timing. The 2 skeletons were smashed at the same time. Multiple targets, even far away. Can likely hit anywhere in the 20m-sided cube the room is, could be multiple enemies. Next, 5 of you, 1 each corner, 1 near the middle. The graveyard skeletons were a renewable resource. As long as the graveyard stood and she had mana, Sofia could make as many as she wanted. They had no identity, no individuality, no fear. Their 2 main weaknesses were that they could never get out of the ground further than their torso, and couldn't deal any damage. Any direct damage. Maybe it's time to take advantage of that somehow. The skeleton in the middle died first by 1/10 of a second, the 4 in the corners died at the same time. Attacks coming from the middle of the room. Could be physical projectile or extensible limbs, likely a single entity. 50 of you, all sides of the room at the same time. Unsurprisingly, all skeletons died in a matter of seconds after poking their skulls out of the walls, but not quite all at the same time. About 15 concurrent targets, half a second delay, 100% accuracy. Haven't felt any kind of tremor, probably never hitting the walls themselves, safe to say it's another deep creature with the same pattern of thought as the parasites. I can't risk using the rot down there. Maybe it's AC. Sofia's war plans were interrupted by a sudden tremor shaking the temple. The trajectory corrector machine in the room she was in had suddenly stopped. Shit. She quickly cancelled all her skills and used her ring's collapse. All the mana the use of the graveyard had spread around in the air was sucked into the ring. It was not very much, yet just the skeletons dying and releasing their mana in the air had been enough to mess with the machine. And that was despite Sofia's heat death's effect absorbing almost half of that mana back. As if nothing had ever happened, the module restarted, its low hum breaking the silence. I really understand the time limit now. If it's this sensitive, it's going to be a pain to deal with. For now I'll set up the isolation field here with a radius of a few meters. As long as the machine is out of it, everything should be alright. After a bit more experimentation, Sofia moved away, setting up her isolation zone on the roof of the western pyramid. The only module nearby was the one for the doors, and it was technically inside the range of the isolation zone, but that module could as well not exist for all she cared. I'm not giving you any path to escape. Sofia used Sun's ritual. Its effects were lesser than usual since there was no ambient mana it could help her absorb, but any amount of regeneration helped. n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. The carbon powder cannot be used. Too flammable. Dried and powdered blood will work then. This line of thought was what started the expedited setup of a bone-made alchemy lab, where Sofia handled the express boiling of blood with the heat of her bolts inside of a big bone balloon. She then used the very same bones, making the recipient crush the dried blood into a powder, which she mixed with what was left of her black shade dust. This should be enough. Now I need to refill my bone storage. Time to shed a few armors. What's best? A cube? A sphere? Maybe a something hedron thing. The issue is I don't know the shape or size of the thing. I'll just make them all, I can mix and match at the last second anyway. I should make some three-dimensional grids too. And balls. A few hundred balls can't hurt. Or I could risk taking a look inside to see what fits better. No, I might as well do everything, I still have more than half a month, and this will only take a few hours. Sofia was still on the roof, observing the details of the contraption her engineer skeleton had made according to her orders. Too much mana still escapes when it breaks, we can't have that. Are you sure you can't do any better with these materials? The skeleton looked around at all the things Sofia had put at its disposal, only to look back at her without a word. It's a no then. I have to give up on the rot snares. Sofia felt that she was about done with her preparations, with only a few details to go through, when she had a realization. Wait. I could have done that from the beginning? I need to try. Sofia jumped from the roof of the western pyramid to the central one. The gravity had become weaker after she reactivated the main power supply, likely due to the life support module, so she could now jump that far, even if she still couldn't fly. Calling upon the powers of the righteous graveyard that was now more a wall skip than anything else, she rushed to the trajectory module room. Finding a good spot near the core of the machinery, she created a bone platform and placed the engine for the mana isolation field there. She turned it on, adjusting the zone until it encompassed almost the entire module without spilling on the adjacent rooms. Then she jumped out of the zone and offloaded some of her mana at it. It's not going in. This was no permanent solution, as maintaining the zone required mana, some of which would inevitably end up messing with the module, but it would probably be a few hours until it got to that point. Most importantly, it protected the module from any exterior bursts of mana she might use from, say for example, the room right under this one. That's it then, no more preparation. I use everything, then this fucker of the deep dies a painful death. Parith, you sit out of this one. Too dangerous. You can pop in and out to cast the chains or the shields if I'm in too much danger, but not if that takes you more than half a second total. And only appear in the corners of the room. We can't risk you getting parasited, understood? After the time required to inscribe the 3 runes, Sofia summoned her book. With the mana and space we're working with, the High Priest and Templars is the best I can summon for the highest returns. That's only 80,000 out of my 180,000 mana, I'll have to waste the rest with Runeforged Overlord. A true waste, but Bookie only has so much fog. The sacrificial skeletons appeared, ready to give up their mana. I can still squeeze out a bit more. The plant mage hero has a nice mana pool that should be perfect with the fog that's left. Nice to see him useful for once. Some of Sofia's remaining mana was used to take out a bunch of fake skeletons out of her storage, and the excess was dilapidated with the third tier of Runeforged Overlord. As her mana hit 0, she grasped onto that feeling, deep in her soul, itching her brain. Once again, her heart popped out of her chest, blackened and beating with an otherworldly force. She was not even slightly distressed by the process anymore. Grabbing it, she took a hearty bite, and reveled in her regained power. The tail, the claws, the expanded vision, everything in place. She grabbed her staff with her left hand, and gave the order for all the fog skeletons to disappear. Heat death made her absorb almost half of their mana. Her mana pool now unlocked, no longer stuck at 0, she took a deep breath, inhaling all that was left over still diluting in the air. She wouldn't let any bit of her precious skeletons go to waste. Health, 358 560/358 560. Stamina, 358 560/358 560. Mana, 180 478/358 560. She stretched, cracked her neck, and let her bone armor grow around her body. 4 minutes and 45 seconds until the demon form runs out. Chapter 265, Madness. Every skeleton in place. Bring out the dummies. The graveyard skeletons had spread around, they were in every wall of the room, with half of them in the ceiling. On Sofia's signal, they extended their arms, not exposing themselves but instead bringing fake skeletons into the room. These dummy skeletons had empty bones and skulls, filled to the brim with shade and blood dust. The creature attacked, crushing them all to bits like it did every time. These were all physical attacks, so whatever appendage they used to strike would be completely coated, and the dust would burst all over the room. Sofia had no way to see what was actually happening, but she trusted that it would work. If not, she had more things in store. As the skeletons did their job, she killed herself. Crushing her own head after stabbing herself once to prevent the one-hit protection to activate was quick and efficient. 3 seconds later, she was brought back by her first rune. So she did it again. In a fight where she needed to be able to dodge multiple attacks all at once, and not get touched once, she couldn't afford not going all out. By dying twice, she stacked one with suffering to 200%, while still keeping a rune active for safety. The lengths I need to go to. 1 with suffering, for each % of health lost during a singular battle, gain a 1% increase to all stats except mana and health until the end of combat, lose 1% for each % of health healed. She had done some testing, and the definition of a singular battle was very lenient as long as she didn't heal, which the rune bypassed without any issue. Time left on the demon form, 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Depending on the situation, this could be 4 minutes too long, or much too short a timer. In both cases, it meant the battle wouldn't be easy. Sofia took 5 extra seconds to breathe and clear her mind after her 2 deaths while the graveyard skeletons all gathered near her. They would all enter the room at the same time, reducing her chances to be targeted outright. She clenched her staff, took a lower stance, looked over her current stats, and gave the order. Let's go. The seconds it took to phase through the floor felt like they lasted forever. The skeletons did their best to eject her out of the ceiling as fast as they could. As she was cannonballed into the room, she could finally see the monster that she had been preparing so hard to face. Her preparations felt futile. This was nothing like she had imagined. The cubic room, the battlefield she had envisioned, expected to be inside of, was nowhere to be seen. Around her, she could see her graveyard skeletons emerging out of ethereal walls of nothingness, tearing through the fabric of this dark void space. She could see faint forms in the horizon, colors that did not exist, shapes that would not connect to themselves. It was abhorrent yet familiar. She had been there once, in a dream. Ormoncleith's realm. The deep. There was no time to contemplate the scenery much more. The graveyard skeletons were being slaughtered. Sofia's eyes trailed along an obsidian spire, emerging from the very heart of a lightless chasm. A monolithic pillar defying all logic, a stab wound unto reality itself. Its surface was edged with pulsating symbols, runes that would shift and writhe in an hypnotizing dance. From the apex of the spire, a miasma of iridescent shadows unfurled, covered in the blackest of powders, the influence of its presence like a thick oil seeping into the atmosphere. There, amidst a sea of tendrils emerged the emissary of Ormoncleith, a form unsettling and incomprehensible. Its body resembled that of an urchin, Sofia thought, that was all her mind could come up with to frame this mockery of common sense into a tangible reality. Jagged spines extended out of its core, fusing and splitting, spiraling outward in patterns defying geometrical coherence. The spines struck out as a synchronous whole, shattering the skeletons they hit into a trillion pieces. Sofia activated the third tier of rune-forged Overlord and moved away. Yet she couldn't flee, soon her back hit a wall. She felt her glove, Aphenoreth's present, resonating with the space she was in. It changed her view of the world. She could see them both now. This realm and her own, interlocking with one another. She was in the room and in the deep. Both places at once. In the physical plane, the situation was similar. As if stabbed by a large mechanical pillar, the round form of the deeps being lashed out at the skeletons with its spines, the two realms' forms layering perfectly onto one another. One of the spine's next target was Sofia herself. It pulled her out of the trance the being's appearance had put her in. She clearly saw the spine coming, her current stats several times what they were ordinarily. She moved out of the way, dodging to the left. The spine altered its trajectory, it aimed for her head but still missed by a fist's width. Her claws did not miss. The creature's tendril was severed. It was not immortal, not incorporeal, she was in its plane of existence and it was in hers. It could be harmed. It could be felt. Sofia emptied her bone storage, filling the space with countless bone pieces. Plates, balls, curves, grids. The last graveyard skeleton died. All the tendrils were on her. As if teleporting short distances, leveraging her omnidirectional flight and insane speed, she outran them all, leading them all around the battlefield and narrowly avoiding their omnidirectional assault. There was no counterattack from her, she had seen the tendrils she severed regrow. She needed a more permanent solution. Evading the flurry of blows, she leveraged her authority over bones, assembling the pieces one by one. The attacks were all drawn to herself, leaving her creation unharmed. She sealed the cubic room from the inside. The creature and herself were encapsulated in a shell of bones. For the briefest of seconds, she turned on the lights. Holy light filled the room, like a divine intervention, and just as fast as it had appeared, it died down, leaving the creature covered in rot. She began her true offensive. Sofia had escaped the innumerable roots of an alphagiad. She had avoided the tentacles of victory itself. Like a sewing needle in expert hands, swerving around the tendrils' weave, she took every opportunity to strike. Her scepter could deflect them, her claws could sever them. The rot gnawed at the beast and its mass of flailing tendrils, it consumed the creature but failed to outpace its eternal rebirths. No matter how much it ate, the same iridescent flesh was born anew from the monster's entrails. The spines surrounded her. She cut them and cut them, her mind an impervious wall of focus and resolve. They regrew without end, but with every dodge, every slash, she inched toward her goal, coming closer and closer to the creature's core. The tip of a spinal cord had grown atop her scepter, the spine of the Black Sun. The creature must have understood her aim, its tendrils retracted and rearranged, when they extended again, their form had changed, they were like infinite tree branches, splitting ends diverging in countless directions. They covered all the surface they could, threatening to envelop and smother Sofia in clouds of their thin threads. Sofia controlled the bones of her armor, she used spines of her own spikes of bones used like forks to pin away the iridescent fabric of nightmares as she still had to avoid the few remaining regular tendrils that were unrelentingly pursuing her, bending in untold ways to catch her off guard. Nov. L. B //JNN. If not for the demon form's spherical vision and the thinking speed bonuses of evasion and way of the fool, she would have been long dead. She knew Perith was waiting for an opportunity to strike, but his form was too imposing. He could never avoid the tendrils, and his fate if he was hit was uncertain. He would sacrifice himself if needed, but Sofia still hadn't been touched once. Her mana, however, was falling at an alarming rate, no matter the insane speeds at which the battle took place, every second of fighting was another second closer to her reserves being depleted by her passive skill, and she still needed to use the rot. After evading the innumerable strikes, she was finally in reach of her goal. Bone Dominus was too slow, it had to be a direct, physical hit, using all the momentum she could muster. She only had one shot. The creature had taken her precious skeleton dog away, and it would pay the price. The tendrils engulfed her as she stabbed forward with her scepter, aiming at an opening in the creature's defenses, a tiny space in between three of its jagged tendrils. Sofia felt her body decompose into its smallest components under the influence of the tendrils, her very existence stripped bare as she delivered her final attack. Yet her soul held true. She had Aphenoreth's mark. Her essence was whole, unblemished, unbreakable. The creature's best efforts could not leave a dent. The sword form of the spine of the Black Sun struck true, avoiding all three tendrils in its way, and lodging itself deep inside the core of the mad beast. From within, the creature erupted in a bright flash of light, the spine's solar burst. Sofia's rune was about to go off. In her last moment of awareness, she activated her rot with the remnants of her mana, leaving her completely empty. Die! The rot permeated the emissary of the deep from within. Eaten from the inside, it could outgrow the all-consuming black plague no longer. The thing gave a last effort, unleashing a pulse of ethereal matter, a concentrated essence of raw concepts and rules, like a wave resonating with the laws of the universe itself. Yet it did nothing as it washed over Sofia, and like the other parasite before it, the creature of the deep exploded, showering the room in its shining, iridescent blood, and revealing the being it had been trying to destroy for millennia. Chapter 266, Beyond Understanding. In the center of the room throned an imposing mechanical pillar of gold and steel which held at its top a glass ball the size of a small hut, covered in golden tracks. The emissary of the deep had been covering it with its body until now. Inside was a presence that Sofia recognized. As the rune rebuilt her body, she observed the being through Perith's eyes. An archangel. The blurry humanoid figure made of blue electricity floated inside of the sphere. Its appearance, riddled with bright points of light like pulsing stars, was shaking and twisting. It existed in many forms at once, as parts of its silhouette appeared and disappeared, not following any logic or reason. The pressure and aura of power she felt from the being of light was one that she was familiar with, the exact same she had witnessed in the first Tower of Trials, upon its archangel's descent. N/O/vel/b//n.c//om. But this was a being supposedly older than the system, and it was made of pure electricity, not mana. Like a living bolt of lightning, staring back at Perith. The first thought going through Sofia's mind as her brain reconstructed was to try identifying the thing. She half expected not to get an answer, as the scribe often gave no result from identifying the mechanical constructs of the temple, but contrary to her expectation, something appeared. False god. Mr. Scribe, are you saying that all archangels are actually gods and this is a fake one, or that all archangels are fake gods? Because this is undoubtedly an archangel, no matter how you look at it. Truth. I am artificial. The elven voice from before resonated in Sofia's head. If more like me, all artificial. No essence. No god. The way it talked was a bit clunky. Sofia wasn't sure if that was the result of prolonged isolation, a general lack of knowledge from them, or just her own translation from Elvish to common being lackluster. Can I move? Oh, I can, for once. Great. Hi? She tried hesitantly. Not that she felt shy, but her pronunciation of Elvish was still pretty much all random guesswork, as this false god was the first person she ever heard use it. I greet you. Freed me. Heartfelt thanks. I had my own reasons, but you're welcome. Care to explain how you ended how you did? My birth, taboo. My domain, forbidden. After creation, imprisonment. So the deep sent this thing to stop you? Did I make a mistake releasing you? And if you were imprisoned right after birth, how do you know these things? Born with understanding. Artificial essence, in temple everywhere, ripe with knowledge and energy of star. Only you know what is mistake. Deep? Mean jailer? Intercept my birth. Stopped me. Forbidden domain. What are you the god of for your domain to be forbidden? Connection. Link. Bridge. A link? Links in general? Connecting what? Connecting everywhere. The being's form turned pallid, its light shifting to a weak white, it phased through the glass ball that had contained it before recovering its colors. Like you. Bridge. But everywhere. Sofia's eyes were glued to the shimmering form of the fake god. Like me. No longer pinned down by the creature of the deep, it had moved through the spiritual plane to exit its prison in the exact same way that Sofia moved through walls. Everywhere so you can travel to the deep and back. Everywhere. But I know now. Forbidden. Yet, free, for now. They come again, I will escape. Stand back. Help you, my turn. They come again. Sofia felt a rising sense of urgency in the fake god's thoughts. She wanted to prepare for the announced return of the deep. Were they going to send another urchin creature? She hoped not, because she was in no state to do anything. She was severely weakened as she recovered from her transformation, and stuck at 0 mana. Perith's presence was the only thing making her stronger than a regular human at this time. Rest. I will protect. The fake god tried to reassure her, yet, in its words, she perceived uncertainty, she perceived fear. The temple shook. It was permeated with a low, drawn-out sound like the blaring of a war horn. What's going on? Sofia took a step back, inching closer to Perith. She looked around but couldn't understand the source of the sound. Truthfully, she already had an idea of what may be happening, but she still held hope that her gut feeling was wrong. She had only seen it for a second, after all, surely it had been the lonely and heavy atmosphere playing tricks on her psyche. It wouldn't have been the first time. She had suffered hallucinations often when she was a child, before she ended up in the orphanage. Yet, Sofia's luck was rotten, the sound was exactly what she feared. It gained in intensity, came closer. Sofia heard the temple break. Layer after layer, its outside peeled away, in a cacophony of broken steel and stone, by a force beyond her comprehension, until the wall on the other side of the room disappeared, sucked in by the open maw of an absurdly gigantic iridescent whale that Sofia could only see the gullet of. Perith had tried to grab Sofia and run, to no avail. They were stuck inside of a bubble of layered space that had suddenly and silently appeared around them. The fake god's doing. As everything around them was sucked in the whale's gaping mouth, the bubble kept them in place. Sofia could only helplessly watch the being of lightning doing its best to resist the pull. The walls around Sofia were falling one by one, sucked in by the hungering beast. A large chunk of wall hit the bubble she was stuck in. Sofia braced for impact as she saw the huge piece of debris actually entering her bubble, but the impact never came. She saw it go through her and out the other side. She was temporarily safe, locked away in the fake god's bubble of protection while it itself was busy fighting back against the whale with attacks through the planes that Sofia pained to even notice. The whale looked like it was winning. Sofia's mind stirred in search of a way to escape, but nothing she could think of had any chance of getting her out. Especially without any mana. At this rate it's going to swallow the whole temple. Sofia saw the machinery of the level above being gripped out and swallowed by the whale's incessant suction. It was bound to happen considering half the temple had already been swallowed before she even caught a glimpse of the whale, but the loss of the trajectory correction module was a death sentence. It meant that even if she somehow survived this, the remnants of the temple would be lost inside the sun before she could even complete the teleportation process to go back. And that was if the transmission module was even still functional in the first place. I'm dead. The blue shine of the fake god was visibly fading as it resisted the unending assault of the whale. Didn't it say that its artificial essence was everywhere in the temple? With the temple getting destroyed. It was in moments like these that Sofia found herself the calmest. The bubble protected her, Perith, and the small chunk of floor they stood up, but the entirety of the temple was disappearing. Already, Sofia could see the sun shining below, ready to swallow her whole if the whale didn't manage it first. Her mind was going through all the possibilities she had to maybe survive this. She even took out the scroll of assisted inspiration she had gotten from her gachapon boxes and quickly wrote on it her query: how do I survive my current situation? The scroll had no answer. Sofia could only watch, defeated, as the last remnants of the temple fell into the abyss of the whale's maw. Even the side pyramids were swallowed whole, nothing was left now, except for Sofia's bubble, the fake god, and the titan of the deep. Sofia sighed. So much effort for it all to end like that? I haven't even found Saria yet. Sitting on her little bit of floor, she stopped paying attention to the invisible struggle of the fake god and the whale. She took out the Midnisit tablet Afinareth had gifted her. If you ever wanted to help, now's a good time. I couldn't do it, sorry. This is just too much. Please. Her prayers were answered by another entity. Be fine. May we meet again. The fake god's silhouette expanded. Sofia saw the ethereal form of its many arms come together in a point. Its blue shine, its form of lightning which had been constantly weakening, suddenly flared up. It grew bright. Brighter and brighter, until it outshone the very sun above which it fought. Sofia's senses were numb, all she could see was white light, all she could feel was Perith's protective embrace. When the light faded there was no more fake god, no more sun, no more whale. Sofia and Perith were in a small room of the temple. One full of familiar-looking machinery, yet somehow in an unfamiliar arrangement. She spotted a glass case in the middle of the chaos of tubes and gears, engraved with the elvish words for "Do not open without permission." It contained an unassuming book. Defense System Module Models. The Southern Pyramid. Chapter 267, Acrophobia. The Archangel sent me to the broken part of the temple that was orbiting the sun from further away. What about them? The whale? I should worry about myself first. How's the quest? Still not completed. Come on, this is the last remaining part of the temple, does that not make it count? I only needed to get rid of all the monsters. Unless there's more parasites here? I'll have to check this whole pyramid whenever my mana decides to come back up. The demon transformation locks that for half an hour I could bypass it by killing something that has mana maybe. But there's only me and you. Sofia looked at Perith, who looked a bit restless, compared to his usual skeletal stoicness. Must be worried that a parasite would attack us right now. That would be unfortunate. Surely we can't be this unlucky. It's all right. My guess about the quest is that it can't update because it can't reach the system. Maybe. How would it know that I killed all the monsters in the temple when it cannot reach the temple in the first place? Unless Mr. Scribe directly confirms it, nobody knows. Rather than to explore the pyramid without mana, Sofia opted to wait inside of the module room for a while. She quickly realized that the gravity was changing from second to second. She felt herself become increasingly heavier, and the direction of down was slowly rotating. At this rate, in another 5 minutes she would be walking on the walls. Gravity was just a detail though, the only more pressing issue was the temperature, which was quickly rising. Is this thing actually falling toward the sun? Just in case, she sent Perith out alone. After all, he could always teleport back to her, but that meant he had to break the door to get out, potentially letting parasites in. Better this than a literal sunbath. They can already send their swarm through the vents anyway. Perith moved out, and all the while, Sofia was worriedly switching back and forth between his and her point of view. The temperature was still rising, but when Perith made it to the door to the outside, he could see that they were still very far from the sun. At this rate, even if we're falling, it would take several hours to get there. Enough to get the fuck out of here. Alright, come back, when I get my mana back we go looking for any parasite here and then. Then Sofia decided to worry about it later and get some rest, because she really needed to let herself breathe for a bit. Even though there's no air again, as soon as her mana was back to a sufficient level, she had put on an unlife rune and explored the entire pyramid, not finding anything interesting, and certainly no deep parasite. After she checked the whole place, she finally got a nice confirmation message for her quest. Quest complete, congratulations. Your reward will be delivered soon. Error. User in scribe-only mode, please re-enter systemic range to receive your rewards. And done. No rewards yet, but that much was expected. Now what, though? The transmission platform is gone. At least the whale shouldn't come after me if it's still around. The fake god was always its target. But I assume it's probably returned to the deep somehow, else would the quest have been completed? Maybe, but maybe not. How do I get back? I could try to call Afinareth again. Though he didn't come to rescue me from the whale when I asked. So maybe I shouldn't count on it. I'm still just a Saintess after all. Sofia was racking her brain to find a way to return to her planet. She got an idea when the temperature she felt started cooling down. The pyramid is going away from the sun right now. So the orbit is probably an ellipse. Maybe if I jump away from it while it's at the furthest point from the sun, I'll manage to escape the orbit? I'm not too sure about how that all works. I knew I should have asked Astelia about her powers a bit more. All I know is I'm stuck to the pyramid right now, somehow. I'll explain my plan to the engineer and nun elves, maybe they can help. The nun skeleton was unresponsive, but the engineer did more than Sofia expected. It used its powers to draw a map of Sofia's plan. It didn't quite work out until she gave it the bone pen and paper she usually used, which he promptly started covering in calculations that Sofia didn't understand at all. Why can they do complex mathematics and yet are unable to write a single legible word? Perith is the same too. Are skeletons banned from written communication or something? It's not like they lack the brain. Well, they do, but they're smarter than zombies even like that, so it really shouldn't be an issue. The skeleton's calculations ended with him drawing a curve going out of the ellipse it had drawn for the pyramid's orbit. It started by going away from the sun in a straight line, then orbiting the sun several times while slowly getting further and further away from it, until going in a straight line again, and then it was almost a straight trajectory from then on. What are the straight lines? Jumps? The engineer skeleton pointed at Sofia's wings. Runeforged Overlord's flight then. That's why I have to stop and do loops around the sun, for the mana to come back up. Well, let's do it. Just tell me when to go, the graveyard will carry me through the roof and I'll fly off. I have several questions, but it's not like I have another option. There's a chance Sun's Oracle would come to look for me, but what if he doesn't? I'm not taking the chance. I would appreciate being back where I belong before the quest to kill Scripture runs out. There's only 99 years left. The engineer skeleton gave Sofia the signal. She had 30 seconds to prepare for her jump. The graveyard skeletons carried her outside of the pyramid. She could see the sun below and the emptiness of space above. No matter how she looked, she couldn't catch a glimpse of her planet anywhere. The engineer gave the signal to jump. Sofia stood immobile atop the pyramid. Suddenly she wasn't so sure about the plan anymore. The window to jump was about to be gone, and Sofia decided to go back inside. The graveyard skeletons pulled her down as the pyramid also started to return closer to the Sunday n/o/vel/b/in.c/om. That's a bit. This is what I get for getting reckless so often. First the dog, then this. I remember my last night at the orphanage. I was afraid to fall on the ground. Yeah, sure, Sofia, scary ground. I'd take a 2-meter fall without even blinking right now, but this isn't even a fall anymore. The only thing I can touch is the sun. Not exactly the safest place to land. I doubt I'll get away with just a scratch and a free teleportation to the nearest church this time. Actually, can't the magisterium call me back right now? Imagine if that shitty class of the church was actually useful for once. Never mind, I'm so far. It would probably cost billions of mana points without something like Sun's godly transmission device of nonsensical teleportations. Half an hour channeling time and I agreed to that. Ugh. The second realm of VPPV better be worth it. Alright. Do what needs to be done, Sofia. Next time, I will jump, for sure. She did not. It took another 3 laps around the sun until she had repeated her mantra enough time to convince herself to go. It can't be worse than carving my own heart out, really. So just jump. Do it. Do it. The runes all over Sofia's arms, torso, and wings all lit up, her leg muscles tensed up, and before long, she was gone, leaving the lost southern wing of the Sun Temple devoid of any life once again. She pushed her flight to the limit, speeding up as much as she could, away from the sun, all the way until her last drop of mana left her body. Fuck. Alright. Good. It's done. Over. Now I only need to wait. Sofia felt almost calm at first. Now she could not turn back even if she wanted to, so there was no use worrying about it. She looked down and saw the sun, which was still too big to fit in her field of view, as well as the already small-looking pyramid, quietly speeding away, further and further from her. The realization of what she had just done made her heart skip a beat. She did her best to ignore her own internal screaming and go over her next step before it was too late. Now I need to locate the planet, else I might as well just close my eyes and go in a random direction. I don't see it right now. I must be on the wrong side of the sun. According to the engineer, I should be going around it right now. I don't really feel myself moving, but I'll trust him. No choice. Seriously. I'm never accepting a quest from a damned god again. Chapter 268, Tao. It took Sofia a good while to locate her planet again. It was barely visible even with her unnaturally excellent eyesight, and she had to thank Afinareth for showing it to her before, or she wouldn't even have known what to look for. With her mana regeneration being only a quarter of what it would be in an environment with mana, a full refill took a bit more than an hour, so every hour, she would use her wings again, and go further from the sun in the direction of the planet. That was the plan anyway. It turned out that really escaping the sun's gravity was a bit harder than she thought. Even more annoyingly, she was moving, and the planet was moving. It was horrendous to try to align the two, but she did her best. I think I'm about good right now. I can keep adjusting the trajectory every hour. The sun is not so far away. It's been 4 days, am I not moving or what? This is so slow. And why is everything so empty? I figured there would be stuff out there in the sky, but I think the planet is actually the closest thing to the sun. That's crazy, especially with all the glittering stars everywhere. Just how far are they then? Sofia kept pushing with her wings every occasion she got. All in all, now that she was not at risk of falling into the sun anymore, this was pretty relaxing. Sure, it was oddly silent, but her time in the temple had been enough for her to be used to that somewhat. Since she didn't have much to do, especially with all her mana going towards her flight, she trained her bone sculpting skills. She figured it might help give some experience to Bone Dominus, and if not, it would still be useful whenever she wanted to make something complex or detailed out of bones. Eventually she got bored of that, and decided to spend some of her regeneration to progress with her customization of Heal Undead instead. This, she had no doubt, would keep her occupied for most of the trip. About a week later, though keeping track of time wasn't exactly easy, Sofia realized that she seemed to be going quite fast. She felt like the planet was coming closer faster every day, which was still slow as all hells, but an interesting discovery. Especially interesting because she tried to slow down during her 80 seconds of Runeforged Overlord free flight once, which, from her observations, seemed to have done exactly nothing. How does that work? Flying in the void here works that much differently? Is it going to take me as much time to slow back down to 0 or something like that? Wait, no, I didn't start at 0, I started at the speed of the broken off pyramid, right? So, if that's how it works, I better not aim directly at the planet. Then Sofia tried to change her direction a bit, which, again, did not work nearly as well as she expected. Am I doomed to actually become a meteorite? I wonder if the crater would be bigger than the biggest bolt's hole. Probably not, right? I'm not sure. Meteorites are supposed to be quite dangerous, but I've never seen one fall. Just in case, it'd be better if I land somewhere where I won't hurt anybody, but can I really aim from up here? Maybe if I try to target an ocean? In the end, Sofia decided that she would try her best to fly past the planet but not actually crash on it, keep slowing down until she was not going too fast anymore, and turn back to actually land. But just to be safe, she was going to prepare 3 unlife runes when she drew close, because she heard that meteorites in the sky normally catch fire, and she would rather be a bit protected even if all she did was pass by. Starting then, Sofia used her free flight to decelerate bit by bit, but, consciously or not, she did not slow down all that much. Space travel was just too boring, she dreaded making it slower. In the end, she had completely lost track of time, she thought it had maybe been about a month or 2. The planet was really starting to get bigger in her view. The closer she got, the more she realized just how huge it was. So big that she didn't manage to spot the human continent no matter how hard she looked. I need to make sure to avoid the Leviathan, so I really ought to find it fast. The planet kept drawing closer. Sofia cast her 3 runes, and used the last bits of her mana to try to deviate her trajectory from the planet even more, because as she was currently, she feared that she might actually hit it. On the bright side, I probably won't even feel any pain. My fastest death ever, probably. Not if I catch on fire first though. Finally, she was close enough to spot a splash of red on the surface. Damn! That's the red desert. It's that small? I take it back, the planet is not huge, it's mind-breakingly huge. What? Sofia had to gulp when she understood how fast she was really going. Now that the planet was closer, she had a better frame of reference. Her current understanding of her speed was, she was going so fast, she would likely zip by the planet in no more than a few seconds and take forever to turn back. Well. Shit. I should have slowed more. At least I'm actually quite far off to the side, so no accidental collision, that's at least one good point. I don't see the moons, they must be on the other side. The planet came closer, and eventually, just like she had planned, Sofia flew by. It did not last long, but the view she got of the planet was truly incredible. She marveled at it going from light to dark as she started seeing the side not lit by the sun. Then she noticed she seemed to be going in a curve instead of straight forward like she did until now. Her eyes were still transfixed on the planet that she was leaving behind. Is the planet slowing me down? Sofia's thoughts stopped there. She regained consciousness a mere 3 seconds later. Her first thought was, I died. Waking up after a rune activating was a peculiar feeling that she could recognize with how much she had experienced it. She did not really have an opportunity to ponder on it, as she died again after experiencing a searing heat worse than her usual bolts enveloping her entire body. When she resurrected for the second time, she could finally actually open her eyes. She was currently flying above a lake of magma. How Perith got me out of there somehow. That must be it, I only have 1 rune left. I don't think I'll make it out of the magma lake though, even if I'm falling very slowly. As she thought that, Perith appeared near her, pushed her, and re-entered the storage. And that just works. When Sofia landed on the edge of the magma lake, she could finally relax. Kind of. Hey. There's a moon goddess, right? I'm sorry. Sofia had hit the moon, quite hard, hard enough that she did not even have the time to feel her body getting absolutely destroyed by the collision. Hard enough that her rune had revived her inside of a magma lake of her own making wherein she died again. But now she was safe. That was actually great news, to her. She had been mentally preparing to spend another month decelerating and coming back, when instead, she had stopped instantly and supposedly not hurt anyone. Well, mostly not anyone. But certainly not nothing. It's unbelievable. I really made this hole myself? Sofia was at the bottom of a deep crater. Actually, calling it a crater was the best she could come up with, but to her it looked more like a hole the size of the entire human continent. Trying to look up to the borders of it made her dizzy. She could see not only the night side of the planet below, but also the huge chunks of the moon that were currently drifting off, making it very obvious that the hole was her doing. An avalanche of system windows appeared in front of Sofia, and she felt a wave of energy going through her body like an electric shock. Ack. Level ups? Wait. After her body calmed down, she hid the system messages without even looking at them. It was just a bunch of levels. She would go through it later, but not before getting back to a place with air and sound. Although now that I'm here, what about the hidden moon? I don't see it right now, but I'm on the wrong side. It's quite dark here, but I can see just fine. VPPV is doing good work. Alright. Let's maybe explore the moon a bit. I'm all out of mana though. I can use the demon form if something bad shows up. Thanks for the help, Perith. I'll just add this to the long list of times where you saved me from myself. Perith appeared next to Sofia, looking composed as usual. Not disturbed by being on the moon. I wonder how many people have been here. I'm probably the only one leaving gaping holes behind though. It's scary honestly. N/O/vel/b//in.c//om. Wouldn't I wipe out the entire human continent if I landed on it like this? And anyone who can survive outside of the planet can do that? Who cares about dragons and gods and shit at this point? This is much more of a threat. Sofia saw something move in a corner of her vision. Something had entered her crater. Yet, no matter how good her vision, the thing was so far away, all she saw was a moving blur. So there is someone coming to check out the new crater after all. I kind of hoped this would go unnoticed. I don't suppose it's Sun coming to give me my reward. Chapter 269, Lion's Den. The moving thing closed in extremely fast. Too fast for Sofia to do anything, but Perith was out, his weapon ready. Not that he could have done anything against someone with that king of speed, but he tried. Human? No rabbit beast lady? The elegant woman that just appeared had white bunny ears just like Guildmaster Cooley, and that was about where the comparison stopped. Though a bit shorter than Sofia, the woman also had significant curves, highlighted by her silky flowing white hair. Her pale blue dress reflected a gentle glow reminiscent of the moonlight. It floated around despite the lack of wind. She silently observed Sofia and Perith, raising an eyebrow like she had a hard time understanding what she was seeing. Sofia couldn't feel or see the slightest trace of mana coming from her. I can't speak, so how do I? Follow me, we should talk in a more hospitable place. The beastkin said with a soft voice and an expression Sofia failed to read. Despite the lack of air, the woman's ethereal voice reached Sofia. She did not wait for an answer. Simply turning back and hopping away, in a few jumps she was out of the crater. Fast. Nov. L. B //JNN. Does she have any idea how long it would take me to follow her that far? Should I really follow a random rabbit stranger on the moon in the first place? Then again, she must be pretty strong, not going and angering her might be more dangerous. She could even be the actual moon for all I know. I don't have mana to identify anything. And with Sun being an elf and Victory being an orc, you never know. Sofia started walking. I still have all my stuff, right? Yeah, everything looks to be in place. Let's go then. A neat trick Sofia had discovered was that by wearing her rings under Afinoreth's glove, she would still be wearing them after a resurrection even if the circumstances of her previous body were compromised. The staff was smart enough to store itself now, and the crown would just reappear on her head no matter what. So the only real issue was the clothes destruction, but Sofia was used to that by now. Activating her armor as soon as she woke up, be it from sleep or from death, was an autonomic reflex by now. Is there a god with a human-looking physical form? Scripture maybe? If so, I would rather my species not be represented by scum. Seeing how after 5 minutes of walking, nothing happened, Sofia decided that it was probably safe to erase her last rune and get some mana back. It was around then that she realized that there was actually mana on the surface of the moon. Not much, but enough to fly if she basically kept her feet right above the ground. How did I miss that? I was too busy thinking about the gods' physical forms. I will need a break after this. Like, a real break, not a drifting in the void break. Maybe spend a week on the Dwarven Islands. Sofia flew forward until she left the crater. She turned back to take a full look at her masterpiece before leaving it behind. Alith is never going to believe me. Now, where did she go? Nothing on the horizon, just more craters everywhere. Guess I keep forward. Eventually, Sofia saw something pointy emerge on the horizon. A spire, then another, and another. What slowly revealed itself was a full-blown city castle of pure white stone, just standing there, in the middle of moon nowhere. The architecture feels a bit similar to Astlias Moon Castle Dungeon. Which does make sense. Was that woman really Moon then? Although this castle was nowhere nearly as big as the one the small vampire oracle occupied, it was still larger than a regular castle. It looked like a refined palace rather than a fortress, but a castle nonetheless. Why is it so big? Everything is always so big. It looks like the Moon Lady is the only inhabitant, so why? The gateway is large enough to let 20 horses in at once. Why even make it a castle at this point? Do you even need protection? Just build a big mansion, no? Sofia entered the castle through the comically large open gate. She hesitated for an instant but decided to land there instead of continuing to fly. Not a dungeon. Since there was a lack of instructions anywhere for her to follow, Sofia simply kept going forward, walking past the arches and columns, the gates leading to other parts of the castle, until she found herself before a large closed silver gate. The gate was embossed with a simplified representation of a large winged dragon standing on its hind legs, holding the moon like with a single claw. Nice door. The rabbit woman opened the doors from inside. Welcome. Come in, you have a lot of explaining to do. Sofia nodded and stepped in, feeling her body be enveloped by the fresh air that was somehow held inside the castle despite the open door to the void outside. The rabbit lady held out a hand that Sofia hesitated to grab for a second before going for a firm handshake. Hello. I am Sofia Afinareth, sorry for the hole outside, it was an accident. The lattice hand had frozen for the briefest of moments when Sofia mentioned her last name, but she finished the handshake as if nothing had happened. Aredes, Moon Guardian, and Saintess, among other irrelevant titles. And I do not particularly mind the hole, Sofia. But you have a lot more explaining to do now, she answered with a serene smile. Now if you would follow me. What kind of beverage do you want to drink? A Saintess, and I cannot even see the usual system prompt? Is she the Saintess of the moon? The way she said it is a bit ambiguous. Would you happen to have some moon spring water? You know of the moon spring? Of course I can get you that. Aredes did not walk long before taking a turn and entering the second door on her right. It was a salon full of books neatly arranged on crystal shelves. There were a few chairs around a small rectangular lounge table on which was a single closed book with a red ribbon sticking out from between the pages and a half-empty teacup. You can sit wherever. Make yourself at home, I will be back in a minute. Sofia awkwardly sat on the chair opposite the one facing the book and teacup as the rabbit lady left by another door. Not what I expected my return to look like. This place is nice, feels safe, away from everything. But living here must be a bit lonely. She had seen the state of the castle, even inside this main, core building, it was mostly empty. There were very few decorations or furnishings in the halls and corridors, and if not for that one well-furnished room she was in now, it would have been easy to believe this place was abandoned. Sofia eyed the title of the book on the table. But it was in a language she couldn't read. Looking at the shelves, the books were actually grouped by language. She managed to locate an Elvish bookshelf and a Draconic bookshelf before the Moon Lady came back the way she had left with a glass pitcher full of silvery liquid. It does look like the moon spring water Astelia served me. Could also be the toxic silver water. They look pretty alike. 2 clean teacups appeared on the table each on their own little plate, and Aredes filled them with the silvery water. There you go, fresh from the source. Thank you. Sofia grabbed the cup and took a small sip, her body and mind instantly relaxing under the magical effects of the drink. The rabbit lady also took a sip of her own. Both cups back on the table, Sofia was first to speak. You wanted explanations, right? What do you want to know exactly? Straight to the point. Do you not have questions of your own? Plenty, but I should at least try to look like a civilized guest. Aredes lightly chuckled. People who accept to come so close without running away, tail tucked between their legs, those are few and far between. You're civilized enough. People avoid you? Like a plague. As if I were the end of them. Well, their fears are not unfounded, she clarified before taking another sip. There was a clear dissonance between the rabbit lady's sweet voice, smile, and the words she said. It made Sofia slightly uncomfortable. Anyway, where do I start? Should I explain the circumstances of the tiny hole I inadvertently made in your garden? If you would indulge me. I can foresee that I will have to recount the story quite often from now on, so of course though it might take a while depending on the amount of detail you want, and if I can trust you. Trust is not something you can create in such a short time, dear. But I reckon I could buy some goodwill. Let's see, perhaps this would be of interest to you, but you will need to have a lot to say if you are going to take it, Aredes offered, bending down to take a thin golden thread off of her left ankle, and presenting it to Sofia in her palm. If your name is what you pretend, Sofia, I am agreeable to such a trade. I shall also help satiate your curiosity about me, if you want, of course. How does that sound to you? I am not much of a merchant. Chapter 270, Dragon's Lair. Aredes' chair creaked as she patiently waited for Sofia to identify the item. Saint's envy. A saint's life is impractical. Halves the saint's weight and prevents accidental destruction of furniture. Part of a 7-piece set. Item level, 140. Grade, Ancient. Sofia blinked several times as she tried to process the information she just got. First of all, she found the item's effect ridiculous. Then she was convinced she absolutely needed it, for reasons. And finally, she remembered a detail of her first conversation with Velour, and everything clicked together in her mind. Why can I never get the full set? Velour giggled. A dragon uses the anklet. That's why. A dragon. Sofia looked up at the soft-spoken rabbit lady again. Aredes. A dragon. Do you mean? Like the Aredian rot? The breath of the outcast? Like that of a dragon exiled on the moon? Is something wrong? Do you not like the item? And no, I like it. I would love to have it, actually. Then why do you look so tense? It's not some kind of test or anything, if you want you can have it, I laid out the conditions rather well already. It's complicated. How all right, I have it. I just understood something. And I think well, words won't do, so I will show you. This is the description of one of my skills. Aredes' face was painted in incomprehension until she saw the system window. Her eyes widened as she seemed to read the short description multiple times, her mouth slightly agape. Aredian rot, when activated, the light of your holy spells spreads the Aredian rot. Upkeep, 10,000 mana per second. You chose to take such a spell. No, wait. The system offered you this in the first place. All pretense of grace and calm was gone. Aredes looked like a lunatic, or rather, she looked at Sofia like she was one. Standing up from her chair, she almost pounced at Sofia, her hands on the table as she spat out her questions. Not exactly, for both questions you're a bit close. Aredes seemed to regain her senses. Sofia could see her face turn visibly red as she sat back into her chair, grabbing her teacup and bringing it up without really drinking as if to hide her face. Sorry about that. I was a bit surprised is all. And no worries, you left handprints on the stone table. I guess my assumptions were right, then. Did you come here to show me that? No. No, absolutely not. I had no idea that there was even anyone here. In fact, I didn't want to come on the moon, and it might be better if I explain all that. Can I still have the anklet? Of course. Yes? Please take it. I can copy most of its magic by now anyway. Fourth piece of the set acquired. Now, where do I start? The encounter with Sun maybe. I need to go one thing at a time. So, to start with how I ended up on the moon, I was sent away from the planet by a quest given by Sunday. Sun, that harpy is still going around causing troubles? Such a handful already chimed in, almost rolling her eyes as she mentioned the goddess's name. This one is certainly not afraid of divine retribution. Anyway, I had to come back from very far, but I failed to gauge my flying speed. I wanted to avoid the planet but I did not see the moon. And you saw the result. That would explain the huge crater you left behind. You can consider yourself lucky you crashed far away enough from the castle, it has automated protection against attacks. I'm more afraid of the person inside than whatever magical protection it might have. As for the skill. Truth be told, my class is a bit special. I guessed as much, yes. Your mana circuits are all over the place. Your relationship with your patron god must be just as unusual as mine. Oh, I have a quest to kill them. Given by the deep. Of course you would let me guess. The talkative one, am I right? Just as I thought. Ah, my face is giving away the answers without me even realizing I wasn't intending to hide anything anyway. As long as it doesn't put me in a bad position at least. Can I ask a few questions of my own now? Nov, L, B //JNN. Aredes gave her a slight nod while she took another sip of moonspring water. Could you present yourself in more detail? I have never met a dragon before. Quite a vague question, there is much to be said, but what would you want to know? Is it myself or dragons in general that piques your interest? Both? Well, you know my name already. As you can guess, my current appearance is nothing but an illusion of sorts. My age I would rather not talk about it. I have been staying on the moon for about 10,000 years, maybe. Though I occasionally go to pay a visit to the surface. I did a lot more before that, but it's all ancient history now. So disappointing, isn't it? Aredes finished her presentation, slouching on her creaking chair. Her bunny ears were drooping like dying plants. Not really. I cannot fathom what I would be doing if I lived that long. I just spent about 3 weeks alone in the void and it already felt long. I'm not one to judge how you live your life. Especially when you seem to imply others avoid you, that has something to do with the rot, right? Partly, yes. Though the issue is not simply the power of my breath but also how I used it. I did try to scrape the records, but dragons live long. Sounds like a sore spot. I should avoid prying too much into the exact reasons. Do you know about all the other dragons? All the individuals? That would be hard, but I know of every lineage, and they know about me. That is a peculiar question to ask. One you speak with anxiety. Did you anger one of us some way or another? No, but I am looking for one in particular. I will get back to it, but I have a few other questions about you and the rot, if that is all right. We're having a friendly discussion, are we not? Forget about my identity and what is all right or is not, just speak your mind. Then, I would like to learn more about the higher levels of the system. Yours, the dragons, the angels, the gods? It seems like everyone past a certain threshold can simply hide their level or do not have one. I can never get a grasp of where the limits lie, Sofia explained, giving up on trying to hide her emotions and frustrations with the system. Everyone is so hung up on these numbers nowadays. My current system given level is 524. Though that is proper rubbish in my opinion, anything above 500 loses any meaning. You're better off not worrying about it. By the time you get there, if ever, you will already know what and who you can or cannot fight, levels be damned. As for other dragons, the ones born after the system's inauguration have all hatched somewhere in the low 400s, those I know of anyway. They usually grow up to somewhere around 460 through the next 1,000 years until they can be considered an adult. Adulthood is 1,000 years? Do you find it surprising? We grow slowly compared to you humans. If anything, the ephemeralness of your lives is more unsettling to us. So brittle, fragile, so quickly gone. Young dragons often like to hide among the mortal races, they seek to experience new things, they never do that for very long. The cultural and lifespan difference is a lot to handle. We can grow just as strong and long-lived, can we not? You must know about Richard, for example. The old bag of bones? Did he teach your necromancy? That is a sturdy one for sure. I should duel him again sometime. But yes, you can, the issue is, how many will? I only met him once. My skills are varied because the system messed up with my class, as I've mentioned before. And quite a few will, with the help of the system. I have met a lot in quite a short time. You do reproduce fast, so the system's help would lead there eventually. It was the entire point. I suppose. I doubted it would work, but I am being proved wrong with the rapid rise of individuals like you. How old are you exactly? It seems to me that you are young even for a human standard, even if your magic is majorly messing with your body. Is it bad? No, the system handles it all, but it is a mess. So? Oh, right. I turned 21 a few months ago. That must feel like nothing to you. You're not wrong. Last time I left this domain, you were not even born. Why do you even stay here? Does the moon really need guarding? No. Moon herself is more than strong enough to step in should there be any issues with her celestial body. And as you have seen now, it takes more than a crater or two to make her move. It was indeed a necessary duty, in older times. Now I live here by habit. I'm just an old lady spending her forever and after in an old castle. Sorry, I tend to speak a lot. Prolonged isolation does that. Are you kidding? You are like an infinite well of knowledge to me. I could sit here and listen to you for months, if I didn't have other pressing matters. Yes, the blabbering one's quest. Let us make that the next topic of discussion. I have been meaning to ask this whole time. Would you explain more about your name, Sofia? At this point I can probably trust her with the details. She's nice. Reminds me of Grandma Lydia before her passing. The entire orphanage was devastated at the news. I was an orphan from the Savolm kingdom, on the human continent.